Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is distorted reality in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 20, The Golden Siege, Part 2. Appa dropped down right at the entrance to the dragon altar with a crash, Zuko sitting on his head and Zahen at the saddle. Azula. The boy called to his sister. She was on her knees, her hair cascading down her shoulders and dripping wet. She had the air of one who had been defeated. She didn't move at the sound of her voice. What happened? Where is he? Sokka happened, she finally said. He took Aang right out from under me. Let's go, Zuko said, not moving from the reins. We can still find them. Sokka can't have gotten far. Where could he have gone? Zahen asked timidly. The only place he'd be able to go, away from the city. Zuko looked to the north, past the dragon altar and out into the wilderness beyond. He was forced into the volcanic fields. We can still find them, he repeated. When his sister made no movements, he shouted at her. Azula. Let's go. Don't you yell at me, brother, she hissed venomously. She twisted her body to stare at him. Zuko's eyes widened. The fire in her eyes and her frazzled hair gave her the appearance of a deranged person. It scared him. Azula, he said more softly. Come on. You can get your revenge on Sokka. We have to save Aang. Azula's moment of rage passed, and she seemed to calm herself. She clutched her golden headpiece in her hand and set her eyes determinedly. Fine. Let's go. And with the grace of a cat, she jumped on Appa's back. Hi Chief Zahen, you stay here. You have to be with your people. They need you more than we do, Zuko said to the Golden City leader. The older man jumped from Appa's back nimbly. You are right, Zahen replied. May Agni's light shine on the both of you, he said. Without another word, Appa flew off into the ashen sky and the dangerous lands beyond. He had hope for them. Sokka shuffled along on the rocky landscape on high alert. The Avatar, whose body was still glowing, was draped along his back, unmoving. This made things difficult for the Water Prince. The land around him was merciless and unforgiving, with rivers of lava and geysers of hot air all around him. The smoke and ash in the air was burning his eyes and throat. He didn't know how much longer he could stand it in this place. He covered his mouth in fabric in an attempt to make breathing easier. He was prepared, though. He was always prepared. He knew exactly where he was going and what he was doing. The plan was to make it through the mountain range and volcanic fields over to the shore again, well away from the city. His grandmother had arranged for a ship to be docked against the island. From there, the two would rendezvous and make their way back to the Southern Water Tribe, now with the Avatar in his clutches. Sokka would finally end his self-imposed exile and restore his honor to his people. Honor was traditionally a Fire Nation thing, but Sokka was only human. He was shamed, and he had to make up for it. The only problem would be getting through the fields alive. The spirit world was still a strange place. It was exactly as he remembered, just a big swamp. A big, nasty, disgusting swamp with annoying, rude, and troublesome creatures. And, to top it all off, he was totally without his bending. Just great. Aang disregarded the fact that he was in his air nomad clothing again. It always seemed to happen to him in the realm of the immortals. It was strange, and he never really thought about it, but the last thing he wore was a simple Fire Nation uniform, for his firebending. He hated standing out these days. He supposed it came with constantly blending into wherever he was. To make matters worse, the annoying, stubborn white monkey was back again, wearing human clothes and prayer beads and humming to himself, deep in meditation, seated on his own strange altar under a wooden arch. Aang approached him, feeling a sense of déjà vu. Hey, tell me where KOH is, Aang demanded. The monkey ignored him and hummed louder. Hey. I need some help here. He was not feeling particularly patient today. Go away, the monkey said flatly. No, Aang answered in the same tone, folding his arms. The monkey grudgingly opened one eye and acknowledged Aang, but a glowing will-o'-the-wisp fluttered by calmly. Follow that thing. It will show you what you need, the monkey spirit said, closing his eye again. When Aang didn't move, the creature spoke again. Goodbye. I'm not an idiot, Aang said roughly. Now tell me where KOH is. Now, the monkey opened both of his eyes. You didn't fall for that trick again. I suppose you're not as dumb as you look. He began to meditate again. The avatar seethed. Now wait just a minute, he shouted, but as he pointed his finger at the monkey, he froze. Wait. What do you mean by again? The monkey sighed. This happened before, did it not? You mean, you remember? You know about my other life? Aang asked, surprise heavy in his voice. Then, he became angry again. But how come Kuruk didn't know? I thought I was here all alone, but he was lying to me all along. I do not have time for this, the monkey muttered to himself, closing his eyes and humming again. Don't give me that crap, Aang said to him harshly. You've got an eternity to meditate. You're a spirit. Now I want an explanation. He crossed his arms and waited. Come closer, the monkey said. Aang tilted his head at the strange request, but complied, stepping up on the monkey's altar. Closer, the monkey said again. Aang bent down to the seated creature. Suddenly, he was hit very hard on the head with some sort of staff. Hey! What was that for? The avatar yelled, grimacing and holding a hand to the bump that was surely growing. You are annoying, the monkey stated simply. You assume too much and you are too loud and distracting. I'm annoyed. The spirit world is no longer in balance, the monkey cut across his outburst. Things that are outside my control are happening. My immortal life may very well end sooner than apocalypse. Or, indeed, the apocalypse may be upon us. What's happening? The monk asked, not expecting this bit of information. Is this spirit world connected to my world? There is only one spirit world, so yes, the monkey stated. Do not worry yourself about these troubles, they are far beyond your duties as avatar and you cannot do anything at the moment to help. Then why did you mention it? Aang deadpanned. The monkey rolled his eyes. Because you were assuming things. You may, perhaps, learn about it another time. Then, the monkey closed his eyes and began to meditate again. Why did Kuruk lie to me? Aang asked, sitting down and crossing his legs. For some reason, the end of the worlds didn't seem to bother him much. You did not lie. You just didn't know the truth yet, the monkey said, keeping his eyes shut. What do you mean, you? Aang asked, narrowing his eyes. You are the avatar, correct? It is all the same spirit. Identities matter not to me. Who are you, anyway? Aang asked inquisitively. You're a strange spirit. That is a strange thing to say, said the monkey. You have met many strange spirits. Good point, Aang conceded. I am the judge of mortals, Monkey King Inma, the wandering monk, the omnipotent, great King Inma, Yama, the laughing monk, and Sun Wukong, but you may call me Inma, for the sake of simplicity, the monkey stated with closed eyes. That's a lot of names. Isn't that a little excessive? Aang asked, raising an eyebrow. You asked, Inma said simply. I have many more names in many ancient tongues. Interesting. So you probably know a lot, Aang said. Indeed, said the monkey. That's a relief. I'm glad I don't have to see KOH again. Inma continued humming. Can you help me? Aang asked him. I hoped that telling you that much would scare you off, but it appears not, said Inma. We are currently in KOH's realm. It would be polite to visit. Well, you're crazy, you dumb baboon, Aang told him. Perhaps, said Inma, humming again to himself. Well, since you already know where I really came from, then that saves me from explaining myself, Aang said. I need to know who those spirits of fire are that gave Ty Lee a little bit of their life. They might be in danger. You are correct, Inma confirmed. Then who are they? What are their names? Aang asked eagerly. They are Ran and Shao, the first pair of dragons, after Agni himself, who also taught the art of fire bending to mortals, Inma explained quickly. Ironically, they are also the last dragons, but that is unimportant. Okay, I thought so, Aang said. He began to get up and somehow return to the natural world, but he was stopped by Inma's further words. "You're leaving?" And I still had more to say. "Strange how you leave when I finally want to say something else," the monkey mused. Aang didn't move, waiting for him to finish. "Well," Aang urged him. "Hurry. I don't have much time left." Inma sighed and rolled his eyes. "Ran and Shao are not the spirits of fire, they are the spirits of the two aspects that make up fire." "What do you mean?" Aang asked, straightening. "Ran is life, and his mate, Shao, is destruction. Together, they weave an eternal dance that makes up the two aspects of fire bending," Inma explained. "They were the ones to teach the art to your race, after all." Inma hummed out a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. "The spirit of destruction is inside your friend. Shao is in danger. That waterbender plans to take away the destructive powers of fire bending, so the ultimate weapon of his enemies is rendered useless. I think you know the result of what would happen," Inma finished. Aang clenched his fists. "Okay, then I need to get out of here. I don't know how much time I have left." Aang turned again to leave. "I am surprised, young Avatar," Inma spoke, freezing him in place again, "that you are not at this moment asking how you might return home." The monkey opened up one eye again and observed him closely. "That's not important right now," Aang said after a moment. "All I need to do now is return to the natural world." "How?" Inma smirked. "Friends are here to guide you back." And suddenly, a murky shape took form in the water and a black and white figure emerged from the trees. It was the painted lady in Hei Bai. "Hey, you two," Aang greeted the spirits with a smile. The woman spirit offered one back, while the forest spirit offered a low growl. "Good luck, Aang," the river spirit said softly, enveloping him with water. He felt his consciousness leaving him as her face made him think of Katara. He was returning back to the natural world, the place where the water tribe ruled, and he was siding with his previous enemies. However, he did not find that he minded much. He needed to help them. They were his friends, and they needed him now. "Finally," said Inma, returning back to his meditation without distractions. However, Hei Bai morphed into his monster form again and blasted him with sonic rays. The painted lady laughed delicately. Gigantic balls of ice and floods of water crashed into the ornate buildings of the Golden City as the nighttime siege continued. The water-bending soldiers had entered the city long before and easily found sources for their bending once inside. Firebenders met them at every turn, protecting their home with the passion and skill they were known for. Zhang Zhang was at the forefront of the attack, fighting off hordes of waterbenders with enormous walls of fire that absorbed and dissipated every attack directed at him. Surrounding him completely was a raging inferno that remarkably did not harm any of the buildings around him, a testament to his astounding control over his element. However, it wasn't enough. The waterbenders had the advantage of night on their side. Elsewhere in the city, Bato, a group of his soldiers, and Tai Li were out in the open, now that the waterbenders were ravaging the city. He was trying, unsuccessfully, to find the Dragon Altar, but there was no mention of it on any Golden City maps he scoured. A cold smirk lit up his face as he turned to Tai Li, who was currently entertaining herself by attempting to wrap her own braid around her head with bound hands. All she succeeded in doing was twisting her head erratically. "Princess!" Bato called to her. "What do you want now?" she whined. "You will show us where the Dragon Altar is," he ordered. "What for?" she asked inquisitively. Another idea occurred to Bato. "Well, because I heard a rumor many years ago that some dragons still existed there. They've always been my favorite creatures and I dearly wanted to see them," he said venomously. "Oh, okay. Well, in that case, let's go," the girl said excitedly. "But you're gonna have to untie my legs so I can show you the way." "Don't count on it," Bato growled. High Chief Zuhen looked over his city as it was laid siege with a mournful expression on his face. His last daughter was down there somewhere, and she was possibly in danger. He was constantly administering orders to his men, but he was forced to remain cooped up in the palace instead of go out onto the battlefield with his soldiers. The ground was rumbling. Ran and Shao were angry and stirring, their sleep disturbed. He hoped that the ancient creatures weren't released this day. I can't see a thing through all this ash and smoke. Azula and Zuko's search for Aang and Sokka was not going well, as the volcanic fumes were starting to have effects on them, too. They were forced to cover their mouths and noses with their shirts. We have to keep looking, Azula said with conviction, as if trying to convince herself. Appa growled loudly. He, too, was in pain. But he also wanted to find Aang. As Azula was scanning the ground below, she was distracted by a bright, slightly blue light that shone overhead. Both she and her brother turned their eyes to the sky, seeing a streak of light pass and throw itself into a cave some distance away. That must have been Aang, Azula said at once. Sokka had long since closed the Avatar's eyes, as he felt that the glowing balls were staring at him. Now, he almost appeared to be sleeping, but he was bound tightly, just in case. The two had taken some form of shelter in an old, inactive vent in the side of the mountain, safe for now from the poisonous fumes from outside. He did not know when his lungs would be clear enough to emerge again, and that made him angry. He punched the cave wall and was only rewarded with bruised knuckles. How come my plans never work? He roared, adding a kick for good measure. There was always something interfering, something totally out of his control, always sent to oppose him. My sister. She never failed. She's a fighter, yeah, but despite the trouble she causes, she's favored by father. Sokka snorted. She's a water-bending prodigy. I'm barely even a master. My father says she was born lucky. He says I was lucky to be born. Sokka halted in his tirade to the Avatar, frozen by the thoughts that entered in his head out of nowhere. Now where did that come from? His father, he never said that. So lost in his own mind, he didn't notice the Avatar sitting up behind him. Hey, Sokka! Aang yelled. The prince turned to him, seeing a sort of wry grin. As soon as the waterbender moved, a huge burst of wind was expelled from the younger boy's lungs. Sokka was thrown outside, skidding against the rocky ground. He stood quickly, putting a hand on his machete as the Avatar comically hopped out of the vent. This time, the boy blew fire from his mouth, and the waterbender rolled to the side to avoid getting hit. He almost rolled into a geyser of hot air. You won't be able to escape that easy, Sokka said sharply, narrowing his one remaining eye. As he said those words, he was forced to dodge a blast of fire from the sky. When he turned to look, the Avatar's fire-bending friend was seated on the back of the bison, which growled in greeting. You back for a rematch? Sokka called to her, once she landed on the ground before the bison. He wasn't quite prepared for this, he was forced to use his drinking water against her. Trust me, it's not going to be much of a rematch, Sokka, she answered, smirking. She thrust her whole body forward into the attack, unleashing a blast of orange fire from her knuckles. The concussive attack knocked him backward, colliding his head with a rock. He knew no more. Zuko was already by Aang's side, cutting away the rope that bound him. Once freed, Aang walked over to Sokka and lifted the prince's unconscious form onto his back. What are you doing? Azula demanded rather than asked. We're not leaving him here to die, Aang answered plainly. She crossed her arms in response and leapt back onto the bison. Zuko didn't argue. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's bring the guy who's constantly trying to kill us. A voice resounded in Zuko's head. Who said that? The swordsman asked Aang and Azula. Who said what? Aang responded. Never mind, Zuko said, giving a light shake of his head. Let's go back to the city. That way. Which way? That way. No, not left. Up those stairs. Well, if you could be more specific. Bato growled. The girl on the shoulders of one of his men was really starting to annoy him. He had to find and slay the dragon fast, before daybreak, when the firebenders would be able to retaliate with their full strength. Well, if my hands were free, I'd be able to point, Ty Lee argued. But no. I have to stay bound. Each step Jared Ty Lee as her captors ran. She, like all the others, was looking ahead with determination in their eyes. Quickly, they came upon the palace, and Ty Lee set her jaw. The palace? Why did you bring us here? Bato yelled, turning to the princess. The dragons are near the palace, dum-dum, Ty Lee returned. And suddenly, she began to shout. Hey! Hey! Someone help! She was silenced from saying anything further, but palace guards began appearing. The princess smirked, her plan had worked. You stupid wretch, Bato seethed. You were leading us into a trap all along. She said with a wide smile. Did you think I was that stupid? But as the guards surrounded them, Bato lifted the girl with one hand and held his machete under her throat with the other. Make one more move and your precious princess will be killed, Bato said confidently to the guards. The high chief himself forced his way through the crowd. Ty Lee! Zuhen shouted. Bato's machete prevented her from saying anything else, as the cold metal was pressed against her neck. You will lead me to the two dragons or the girl will die, the admiral threatened. Dad! Don't! I'd gladly die for my people. Ty Lee yelled. Zuhen was conflicted. Would he sacrifice his people, or his daughter? Come, Zuhen said finally, defeated. Bato smirked, guiding Ty Lee along, flanked by his soldiers. Leave your men behind, Bato clarified as they moved. Zuhen motioned for his soldiers to stay, and the high chief guided them there himself. They came upon the ornate golden door that served as the entrance to the dragon altar, which could only be opened by firebending. Zuhen unsealed the doors and continued, presenting to them the glorious scene of the watery sun and the dragon steps, the scene of Bato's victory. The door was sealed behind them to keep anyone else out. Where are the dragons? Bato asked Zuhen. If this is another ambush? It is no ambush, Zuhen said quietly. The dragons will appear once you climb the steps and stand upon their altar. Good. Your usefulness has been spent, Bato said, giving him a swift hit in the temple with the bone handle of his machete. The high chief promptly fell to the ground, unconscious. Bato turned to his small team of soldiers. You have all done well. Stay here and stand guard. He turned toward the imposing stairs, intending to make the climb himself. He dropped Ty Lee at his feet, who landed with a muffled cry of pain. Every step Bato took symbolized his ascension, not only to the altar, but his absolute rise in power. He reveled in the glory. A loud, low groan rung out in the air, causing Bato's and everyone else's heads to turn to the noise. Bato was halfway up the steps, and he cursed. The Avatar was here. The boy leapt from his bison's head before it hit the ground, drawing his sword and knocking away all of Bato's soldiers with a shockwave of air. Even Ty Lee tumbled, but since she was already on the ground she didn't go far. He swung his black blade and cleanly cut through her binds, freeing the girl. She stretched her limbs. Finally, Ty Lee groaned, flexing her sore muscles. By this time, Apple landed, and Zuko jumped from the saddle eagerly with his own swords drawn. Azula, stay up there. Aang shouted to the firebender. Watch him. Don't let him be taken. She knew full well who he was. The girl rolled her eyes, but grudgingly accepted the offer. The Water Prince was unconscious through their whole journey back, and for some reason, Aang wanted to keep him. She did not agree, but he strictly told her to listen to him. She supposed it would deal a major blow to the enemy, the Water Nation. Sokka was currently hidden under a blanket. Aang ran to the base of the staircase and swung his sword in an overhead arc, releasing blades of air in the wake of his weapon. None of them reached far enough to hit Bato, who continued running. As Aang was about to follow, a pink blur sped by him and bounced up each stair with astounding skill and balance, determined to stop the waterbender herself. Aang followed, albeit at a slightly slower pace. He left his glider on Appa, and there was no time to go back and get it now. Bato was almost at the top, followed closely by Ty Lee and then Aang. Bato! Stop! A voice shouted hoarsely, managing to reach them even from their altitude. The waterbender turned and coldly regarded the new appearance. Lady Kunna, what a pleasant surprise, he said silkily. He formed a wall of water and held it directly below him on the staircase, preventing Ty Lee from reaching him. She couldn't even jump over it. However, Aang could. He reached Ty Lee's height in no time, and, giving her a quick glance, He pushed himself upward with a fierce wind, and changed his direction and propelled toward Bato with a burst of fire from his feet. He drew back his sword, ready to swing, but water coiled around him from behind and flung him backwards, straight through to the open air, where he fell. In midair, Aang frantically wheeled his arms, generating wind resistance that slowed his fall, landing on a cushion of air. He was safe, but back where he started. He looked up at Bato and Ty Lee. "Whatever you do to those dragons, I'll unleash on you tenfold," Kun Na bellowed. Bato, unheeding her words, finally reached the top of the dragon altar. They waited. The waterbender spread his arms wide at the top, as if encompassing the entire world and the spirits in his grasp. "Ran! Shao!" he roared. "Come and meet your destiny." As if answering his call, two long, serpentine forms shot from the tunnels on either side of him, wearing ferocious faces, tremendous wings, and piercing yellow eyes. One was the color of the water and the sky, of azure and blue fire, and the other was ruby red, of crimson fire and blood, and the dawn sky, which was lighting up behind them. Together, they divulged all their majesty, flying, soaring, swimming through the air, the last of their kind. Life and destruction. Ran and Shao. The two sides of fire bending, revealed in all their glory. They twisted and coiled around the stairs and Bato, conjuring great winds that ruffled both him and Ty Lee. The princess and everyone below her gasped in awe. It was not often that the two true fire-bending masters came out of their lairs. Bato used the water from his wall and twisted it, condensing the water into one long lance of ice. He aimed carefully, following the path of the blue dragon, Shao. She circled, ever so slowly, observing the waterbender carefully with one of her serpentine eyes, as if resigned to her fate. He pulled back the lance, ready to throw. And he was tackled from behind by the form of Ty Lee, who had no time to attack his chi points. The two rolled and brawled perilously close to the edge of the altar. But before she could disable him, he managed to attack her with a jet of water, forcing her over the edge. "Ty Lee!" Zuko howled at the top of his lungs. Aang circled around the great staircase at the speed of wind, planning to do whatever he could to save her life, but saw her still, hanging on to the top of the altar with all the strength she could muster. And then, Bato threw his lance, aiming for the weakness in the blue scales, her underside. Her heart. The eyes pierced the dragon, spouting shockingly black blood. Shao gave out a loud wail, echoing piercingly over the valley and throughout the city. She seemed to fall slowly, everyone was frozen, unable to react. Finally, she crashed against the ground, right at the base of the staircase, spilling the basins of water and their contents all over the place. Outside in the Golden City, the battle still raged. Fire soldiers were combating their enemies with weapons, but some who used fire-bending were still standing. Zhang Zhang was one of those people, coming face to face with half a dozen waterbenders. He calmly regarded them and shot a jet of fire from his fists, continually blasting and covering them all. But, it seemed to do no damage, as if it were no more than a warm breeze. The cringing soldiers realized that their life was spared by some unseen force, and continued attacking. This was happening to firebenders all around the globe. Kun Na sprang into action, displaying surprising strength and skill for a woman who was thought to be forbidden to fight. Water from the sun-shaped basins reached out for her, and she gladly pulled it in, surrounding herself in it and utilizing the octopus form to grab all of Bato's private soldiers and slam them against the ground. The dragon and her wings seemed to take up all the space in the holy area. Her mate, Ran, circled the sky frantically around Bato. Bato feared the woman's wrath. Using what remaining water he had, he covered his feet and slid down the whole staircase, calling up water from the destruction below which carried him over the dragon's unmoving form. Kun Na was about to give chase, but Aang stopped her with a request. "Please. We need you to heal the dragon for us," Aang pleaded. He soared over Shao's form himself and circled around the back of the altar, seeing Ty Lee still hanging on for her life. "Ty Lee. Let yourself fall. I'll catch you." The girl rapidly felt the strength leaving her fingers, which were pale white. She looked fearfully below her, seeing the speck on the ground that was Aang. It was such a far drop, but she didn't have much time left either way. She'd be forced to let go by her own body. And fall it did. The wind screamed past her as she descended, giving out a long, drawn-out cry. And somehow, the wind seemed to be getting stronger, ripping her hair straight up, and perhaps even slowing her fall. And she was surprised when she landed on something soft, causing her to bounce off of it. And she flew rather ungracefully into someone's arms, causing her and the other person to topple over painfully. She looked at the person who she was now crushing beneath her. Aang! She shouted joyfully, hugging him as tightly as she could. Aang was solemn as the air cushion he used to catch her dissipated, looking past the girl at the form of the fallen dragon. The distressed red dragon, Ran, finally made a new movement, shooting off into the city. Revenge was in its cry. He had failed again, and now, Ty Lee would be the one to pay the price, by giving up her own borrowed life. Absolute fury of the worst kind gripped the Dragon Lord as he swooped down onto the city, his eyes burning, giving him a shade of only red. Bestial instincts took over completely, but the majestic creature somehow managed to differentiate between the Sun Warriors, the ones who worshipped his kind, and the enemies. Rip. Burn. Kill. Ran, who commonly symbolized warmth and life, was unleashing complete destruction on the moon worshippers below, a terrible sight to behold, the very last sight of his prey as they died in anguish, ripped by his piercing claws or turned to ash in a storm of fire. Innocent civilians cried and hid their children from the gruesome sight, but hearts of sympathy reached out to the distressed dragon that had lost its mate. The direct descendant of Agni coiled and soared high above the city, and the mountains, flying free for the first time in decades. It did not revel in the freedom. More blood needed to be spilled. Ran set his serpentine eyes on the water navy fleet. All hope is lost. Ty Lee mumbled sadly, falling to her knees in front of the body of Shao. The sapphire-colored dragon was unmoving. Zuko, Azula, Kunna, and Ty Lee were all mournful and terrified of the fate of the firebenders, but Aang was worst of all. He had failed again. He knew what was coming next, and he couldn't stop it. You have been touched by the spirits, Kunna said in awe, pointing at Ty Lee. Some of her life exists in you. Ty Lee's face morphed into one that was dutiful. Solemn. Sad. Yeah. You're right, huh? And she stood up. Zuko moved as if to intervene, but Aang beat him to it. No. All faces turned to the normally calm, level-headed Avatar in shock. I can't let this happen. Ty Lee can't die. Aang, there's no other choice. Azula said sharply to him, but he could hear the pain in her voice. She had long since abandoned her post over the unconscious Sokka to join them. Yes. There has to be, Aang said sincerely. Kunna. You're our only hope. Heal her. But. She's already dead. The old woman said quietly, resting a hand on the dragon's soft underbelly. No. Quickly. Just try it, damn you. Heal her. He knew this was coming and he couldn't stop it. His eyes were hot and his throat hurt as he shouted at the old waterbender, and without even realizing it, he let the tears fall. Coming here, to this world, it was all for naught. He thought he had the chance to change things, but was fate irreversible? Was you meant to die? Was Ty Lee meant to die? Aang collapsed to his knees and sobbed freely, feeling defeated, worthless, like a failure. The sight of him made Zuko angry, who clenched his fists. Azula looked at him softly and averted her eyes, unable to watch him break down. Ty Lee felt her own resolve wavering at the sight of his crumpled form. Only Kunna caught the glorious, but painful sight of the young boy suddenly looking forward, an otherworldly glow in his eyes and tattoos. The Avatar spirit had been awakened again. The bridge between the worlds slowly stood and straightened, and for once, fierce winds weren't whipping the space around him. In the same movement as his rise, he calmly brought his hands closer to him, and splayed out his fingers. The water around his knees began to rise. The boy threw his hands into the heavens, summoning up all of the water around them, freed from the basins and the rocks, lifted high into the air. Lingering droplets floated after the large mass, capturing the eyes of everyone present. And then, the great being before them spoke, his voice layered with the thousands of spirits within him. Kunna, help me. Help us. The mass of water began to glow. It was a pure white, like the Avatar spirit container's eyes and tattoos, shining bright enough to nearly blind them. Zuko, Azula, and Ty Lee shielded their eyes. Each shining droplet glittered like a star. The Avatar guided it to the dragon's wound, and as the healing began its long, difficult process, a delicate ringing was produced that was likened to music, though a soft and mournful kind. Kunna joined the Avatar in concentration, laying her hands in the water over the horrendous wound. Her own small spirit was dwarfed in comparison to the mighty beings next to her, but it made her almost completely at peace. With this kind of help, the task in front of her did not seem nearly as daunting. The holy light made it seem as if nothing could go wrong. "Look," Ty Lee gasped, unable to keep her eyes away from the wonderful sight, "she's breathing." And, indeed, Xiao's form was rising and falling. She was alive. Bato surfed on a platform of water as it dragged him through the city, away from all the fighting and far from the dragon. He was focused only on leaving the city to safety. His mission accomplished, if his fleet was still floating, they would take the city in a matter of hours. And suddenly, he felt as if he crashed into a solid, invisible wall. The water halted, throwing the bender riding it into the ground. Bato groaned and pushed himself up. Only a waterbender could have done that to him. "You!" A feminine voice shouted at the man. Bato whipped his head around and looked at the person who dared challenge him, standing in the middle of the road several feet away. It was definitely a woman, with tan skin, thick, wavy mahogany hair, and cold blue eyes. "You tried to kill my brother, Princess Katara," Bato exclaimed, stunned. "What are you doing here?" Watching my brother's back, she shot at him, swinging her arm. Ice needles shot at the water tribe warrior, who dodge-rolled. "You tried to kill him, more than once. Well, too bad. Your brother has been dead for days," Bato said venomously. "Killed by a bounty hunter he hired months ago. That was a set-up, planned by Sokka himself." The water princess glared. "You're a weakling and a fool, you know that? He's alive. And I'm going to kill you for him." Puddles from recent rains shot toward the male waterbender from both sides, freezing in midair to deadly icicles. He was able to condense moisture fast enough into a stream of water, which was punched at the girl faster than the eye could see. Anger in her features, the younger fighter dashed in the man's direction, drawing water from her pouch as she went. The rope of water twisted around the man's ankle and ripped it out from under him, throwing him to the ground. Bato snarled and picked up water from the ground, shooting more ice spikes at her. She sidestepped, turning it into a zigzag motion, running toward him again, gathering water on both sides of her. It coiled in the air and rushed at her opponent, nearly breaking him with the astounding weight. "You know," Bato panted, "it's dishonorable for a man to have a woman fight his battles for him, custom breaker." "That's why he doesn't know about me," Katara smirked, continuing the onslaught. Rand stopped his uncontrollable rage, feeling the life of his mate return to him. He unleashed one final victory roar into the sky and disregarded the burning, melted fleet below him, and flew back. As it soared over the city of gold, the great dragon spotted more water people flinging their flimsy liquid into the air. Rand dove toward them. "That's it, Bato. You've lost," Katara said darkly, straightening. She pushed her long hair out of her face. The man was growling, trying to shake himself free of the ice pillar she locked him in. He was disgraced, beaten by a woman who was never formally taught to fight. "No!" he yelled, anguished. She crossed her arms, looking away, and into the sky. There, she spotted a fearsome sight. "Bato!" she yelled, but she was too late, and was forced to dive out of the way. The Crimson Dragon swooped down on the middle-aged waterbender and plucked him off the top of the ice pillar, holding him in his great maw. The dragon tilted its head back, swallowing him. Katara winced, but remained hidden. There was nothing she could do. Besides, the monster probably deserved it. They were silent as the Avatar and the healer worked, still surrounded by the ethereal glow, healing the terrible wound of the blue dragon. They both had their eyes shut tightly, gathering their wellsprings of knowledge to the forefront of their minds, searching deep within. Zuko, Azula, and Ty Lee waited with held breaths. And finally, the Avatar's arms seemed to shudder, and the glowing and spiritual ringing died out. Aang managed to let the water down gently with the last of his power, but he immediately collapsed afterward. Zuko and Azula were there to catch him. He moaned. "I haven't felt like this in a while," Aang muttered, grabbing his head. The only other time Azula saw him in the Avatar state, he didn't collapse like this, but he easily used much more power this time. She hugged him tightly, resting her eyes, glad that he was safe. "You did it!" Zuko was the first to shout in joy, punching a fist into the air, upon realizing the fate of the dragon. "The dragon is alive and safe, we won." And he turned to Ty Lee and smiled just like her, hugging her tightly. "You're alive." And, surprisingly, Azula willfully joined in, too, grinning from ear to ear. On Appa's back, Sokka popped up from under the blanket, still bound by the thick ropes. He seemed dazed and confused. "What's going on here?" he mumbled lightly, his unscarred eye half-lidded. Kunna shot her gazes at the other four children. "We can explain," Azula said, laughing to herself. She was too happy to care about the old woman's reaction. The sun rose again over the grand city, a new day bringing healing and reconstruction. Townspeople set to work rebuilding their homes from the waterbender siege and even the dragon's attack, eradicating any lagging enemies from their city and cleaning out the bay of the wrecked ships. Zuhen stood, looking over his city, his hands clasped behind his back and a smile on his face. His head was heavily bandaged from Bato's blow, but he, too, was happy. Aang, Azula, Zuko, and Ty Lee stepped up by his side. "Well, we have to get going, soon," Aang started. "I need to find an earthbending master." "I know," Zuhen stated. "You need to complete your destiny." "Thank you, Avatar, for saving my city and keeping the waterbenders away. We owe you a great debt." "Don't worry about it," Aang dismissed him with a grin. His gaze was taken by Zhang Zhang, who was striding up the steps toward the group. He looked the same as ever. "Master Zhang Zhang." Aang called in greeting. Azula bowed. "Master Aang, Master Azula," he said shortly, bowing in return. Aang's eyes almost popped out of his head, and Azula gaped. "Masters." Azula managed to choke out, shocked. "But." No stuttering, the fire-bending teacher ordered. "You have both progressed rapidly, far better than any other student I have seen. You are hard workers who show fierce determination and worth, as well as the potential to grow and learn. You have been deemed worthy of the title Master." "Thank you," Aang said gratefully, and they both bowed together. Aang then looked toward the horizon. "So," he said, turning to Zuko, Azula, and Ty Lee. "Are you guys with me?" he asked hopefully. "Our next destination is the Earth Kingdom, and after the dangers you guys saw here, well..." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," Azula said through clenched teeth. "Are you that unobservant and stupid? Do you even need to ask?" What do you mean?" Aang asked her. Zuko stepped by her side in support and laughed. "Wow, Aang. I never expected you to be this dense," he said. "Of course we're coming with you. We're in this till the end. I thought you knew that from the beginning." Zuhen and Zhang Zhang smirked. Aang turned to the only remaining member. Ty Lee. She fidgeted with her fingers nervously, avoiding looking into his eyes. "I'm sorry, Aang." "And Zuko, Azula," she said quietly. I think that my place is with my people, now." As she spoke, she gradually sounded surer of herself. "It took me a while to realize it, and you guys helped, but I'm ready to accept my position as princess of the city. I'd give anything to them. I finally understand." She clenched her fist. "Sorry, but I'm staying here." Aang smiled gently. "That's good, Ty Lee. I'm happy for you." Zuko clasped both of her hands. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Well, I can't force you to make a different decision, can I?" He sighed. "So, I guess that's it between us, huh?" She nodded sadly. "Yeah. It was never true love between us, was it?" he asked. "No." But she smiled. "I'm not going to get in the way of that other girl on your mind," she said deviously. At his shocked expression, she giggled. "I know about her, Zuko." I can see it in your aura. And I don't mind. I hope you are happy with her, whoever she is. My. Zuko thought to himself, setting his jaw. He didn't realize it, but did she have that much of a lasting effect on him, the few days they were together? He became concerned for Ty Lee again. But what about Chan? I hope things get better for you. Oh, don't worry about that, she said, snorting. Daddy gave me the freedom to choose who I want to marry myself. Who? He asked, genuinely interested. Not Chan. And she laughed again. It was infectious, causing all the others to join in. She wrapped her arms around Zuko in a tight hug, as if giving her last goodbye. A moment later, Aang and Azula put their arms around the two, and Seibishi coiled around their heads. Zhang Zhang broke the moment of happiness. What are you going to do about your young captive? He asked, as Sokka was led over to them and Appa, bound in rope. Aang sighed upon seeing his former friend. We'll take him with us, just like his grandmother wanted, Aang said emotionlessly. Sokka didn't react, he had already known this. He was there when Kunna decided to leave him with the Avatar, hoping they'd be a good influence on him, while she ran away to the Earth Kingdom to find some contacts. He had not spoken since that moment, boiling in well-concealed anger for everyone around him, treating him like a common animal. Aang planned for this to happen this time around, but he did not expect Kunna's ready rejection of her grandson. He wondered how it would affect the waterbender. Aang was worried for his former friend, and he subconsciously gripped the hilt of his black sword tightly. He hated doing this to Sokka. As he looked to the south, toward the Earth Kingdom, Aang wondered how much his journey would change from his previous one, wondering what awaited them in the land of the Earthbenders. The newest turn of events was pushing him and his friends ever onward to their destinies. His next mission? Finding Toph. Katara was currently residing in a seaside cave not far from the Golden City, staring over the ocean as she contemplated her next move. Would she follow her traitorous grandmother? Or would she continue to trail her brother, now that he was in the arms of the enemy? She knew she couldn't face them all by herself. She needed someone new to help her in her pursuit. And then she remembered, she was a princess, and she had the support of the entire Water Nation behind her. Nobody stole her brother and got away with it. Book 2, Earth. Chapter 1, Merge. He watched his best friend, his brother, sharpen his machete, his calloused hands striking the weapon with a flint stone, grinding the bone and metal weapon to a sharp point. He worked with practiced ease and expertise, being born in the water tribes, it seemed to be natural to him. His face was hard and impassive, his rigid blue eyes set firmly on his tools. However, other than his eyes and his weapons, he didn't look water tribe at all. Like everyone else in their traveling group, he was currently dressed in bland Earth Kingdom clothing. He wore a nondescript forest green vest with white sleeves, tucked into his belt which had an ornate scabbard and a water tribe club attached to it. Strapped to his back was a leather case, which currently held a boomerang. He also wore plain brown pants, which were tucked into dark, leather, mud-stained boots. Like most Earth Kingdom men, his brown hair was bunched up into a knot at the top of his head. It was better to blend in than to hide out, as Aang always said. The group seemed to live by this rule. Aang was clothed in Master Yu's old-school uniform, but with a bowl-shaped casa hat that covered most of his face, in addition to his cloth headband hiding his arrow. Like all Earthbenders, he was barefoot. Sadly, Toph was the only one with the luxury to wear clothes she was familiar with, as long as they were in Earth Kingdom territory. They weren't guaranteed safety in any country anymore. The two sat in companionable silence, being the only ones to remain in the camp. Zuko, Katara, and Toph entered a nearby village in order to replenish their supplies. Aang and Sokka stayed behind to protect their camp and keep Appa hidden. Surprisingly, Sokka was the first to break the silence. He had become quiet in the past few weeks, ever since Suki's very recent death. Would you like to learn how to wield one of these? He asked, referring to his machete. What's to learn? All you have to do is swing it around, the Avatar answered, focused on his practice of sandbending. Sokka predictably took mild offense to this and frowned. Well, what use is sandbending? He retorted with a grin. It has plenty of uses, Aang replied, getting jokingly offended. It's just as useful as waterbending. I can even use the same style, but it's better if there's no water around. In that case, you can just use any of the other 3 elements you have, Sokka shot back. Why you'd resort to bending sand, I have no idea. It's all in the styles behind each bending art. With waterbending, I can defend and redirect attacks. Sand bending uses almost the same principles. That's why you're not a bender. Still can't knock any heads with sand, Sokka stated, giving his club a quick swing, but because of his tired fingers, he dropped it on his knee, eliciting a pained howl. And for almost no reason at all, the two burst out laughing. Aang fell to the ground, clutching his gut, and Sokka did the same. It felt so good to laugh, to be free of the everlasting war for just a moment. The two seemed clinically insane, laughing so hard for entirely no reason. These moments were rare. The war was tiring on their minds, wearing them down to tense and feeble shells. It seemed as if they had just cracked. After what felt like a good, long while, the two were able to breathe properly and just lay spread-eagled on the ground, staring up at the dusky sky. It was getting late, but they weren't concerned about the lack of their 3 companions yet. Stars were beginning to appear in the sky as it darkened. "Hey, Aang?" Sokka asked, breaking the silence again. "Do you miss?" He seemed to be thinking of a name, everyone. Their happy moment suddenly vanished as if it never was, and the air was filled with a silent melancholy. "Of course," Aang said immediately. "I always do. I think about every single one of them. Them was all their friends that had died. And it really was all their friends. I see them sometimes," Sokka stated blankly. "In my dreams." "Me too. It's as if I was there for every one of them," Sokka continued, "as I watched them die. I can see their fear, feel my helplessness. The worst part is their coldness. I failed to protect them all. You. Suki. Dad, Mom. Jet," Aang added. "Bumi, Haru, Tyro, Teo, and his father." The list continued on as the two warriors named every single one of their friends that they had lost. Morbidly, they wondered aloud who was next. "If it's me," Sokka stated, "I'm hacking off as many heads as I can before I go. But if it's me, those guys are going to witness destruction like they've never seen before," Aang grinned. "A huge firestorm. Or I might just crush all the soldiers around me in a rock avalanche, or a blizzard. Hijack an airship and crash it into the others. Whip up some winds and blow them all off a cliff. Suicide bomb them all to the heavens." They both sighed together happily. "Yeah. That's how I'd like to go. Like heroes." Aang awoke the next morning, immediately undergoing his regular ritual of remembering his dreams. Every night they came, but for some reason, he didn't have to dredge up as much as he could from that night. The memories of the dreams weren't fading, it came to him easily. And the dream never felt so real. He could have sworn he was back there, traveling as a fugitive in the Earth Kingdom, with the rock against his back and the nightly breeze against his face. He even remembered, with stunning clarity, how when Sokka sharpened his weapons, Aang felt as if his teeth were being scratched. It was strange, to say the least. Back then, they all seemed to have some sort of death wish. Most of the time, with all of their friends dead, they lost track of what they were fighting for. Katara was the only one with the will to live, and it kept her going. But, inevitably, she lost all hope of winning. She was the first to suggest giving up on the people who needed her. Who was left? Nobody blamed her for her thoughts. Strangely, it was always Toph who got them back on track, as Aang remembered before. She constantly beat them back into shape when they were at their lowest, in the dirt, but that was when she took up the reins and showed the other 4 what she was really made of. She was like an army sergeant, pushing them to keep going, to never give up. She was their never-ending stability. She wasn't quite as motherly as Katara as she grew older, but she fiercely defended her family from any harm to befall them. But sometimes, it seemed as if she had the greatest death wish of all. Even the toughest of stones erode eventually. Even the hottest fires flickered out. Even the sharpest blades dulled. Even the strongest winds slowed. Even the fiercest rivers stilled. Who was left for them to fight for? Aang never thought he would feel so at ease on a Fire Nation ship. Like the ones back in his world, the theme seemed to be black and red. There were some golden decorations and trinkets in Aang's cabin, but the ship wasn't as grand or terrifying as the ones back home. The Golden City had a few ships of their own, but they were nothing compared to the Water Navy fleet. Feeling restless, Aang sprang from his red satin bed and into the black metal hallways, feeling the now familiar rumble of the ship's engines. It had been 3 weeks since they had left the Grand City. Now they were heading south. Zhang Zhang was bringing some of his men to the mainland of the Fire Nation to help in the defense, while simultaneously dropping off the Avatar, his companions, and his prisoner halfway there. They would be departing on Appa this very morning. The sunlight was warm on his face as he ascended to the deck of the boat, and he went to the ship's banister after giving a quick greeting to Appa and Seibashi. The female lemur currently had her ears wrapped around her, shyly observing the goings-on with her large, protuberant eyes. She clung to Appa more often than humans, including Aang. On the other side of Appa, Sokka was scrubbing the deck on his hands and knees, overseen by a clearly delighted Azula. Ever since he was captured, Sokka was forced by the crew to do manual labor, constantly watched by Aang, Azula, or Zuko whenever he was out of his cell. Sokka was mostly held in a cabin in the ship's tower, but he was originally supposed to be put in a standard prison cell beneath the ship. Aang fiercely opposed this, using the excuse that he was closer to water down there. Zhang Zhang relented. Azula seemed to enjoy taunting and humiliating the waterbender a little too much, but Sokka silently took it or outright ignored her. Curiously, he made no attempt to escape yet, but Aang did not doubt the possibility that he was coming up with a brilliant plan, under the likelihood that he had the same mental strength that Aang knew Sokka to have. Sokka was not bound, for now, because there was nowhere he could go on the ship, and when he was outside, he was always watched. Otherwise, he was locked in his cabin. "Keep cleaning your filth, waterbender," Azula snarled. She did not notice Aang behind her back. "Clean the filth that your people unleashed on this world. You know that you're responsible for the starving people in my country? Or the dust storms in the Earth Kingdom. It's because you and your people always suck the ground dry wherever you go. It's despicable. You kill innocent people even without the war." Aang knew that whenever she thought he wasn't around, she'd throw all her anger and hate at Sokka, always speaking in clear, venomous tones. Ever since mastering firebending, she had become more like the Azula he knew. Now, she wasn't just all talk, she had power to back her up. And she utilized it well. Sokka kept scrubbing, dipping his sponge into a bucket of water. In a fit of rage, Azula kicked the bucket at the waterbender, dousing him with water. He simply bent it off him, not even glancing at her. "Look at me, you monster." She pulled her leg back to kick him again, and even fire gathered around the tips of her toes. As she pulled back, Aang grabbed her ankle and she almost stumbled. She spun around angrily at the Avatar. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you from injuring him pointlessly," Aang stated evenly. His gaze was hard. "Don't cross me." She pulled her leg free from the boy. "Why are you defending him?" she demanded an answer. He simply shrugged in response. "I'm the Avatar. It's what I do." He narrowed his eyes at her. "Don't let it happen again." She glared right back. "Since when are you a self-righteous jerk?" "I think you're exaggerating a bit," Aang said, sighing. This wasn't the first time one of these arguments had occurred in the last 3 weeks. "Come on, I have to tell you something," he said after a moment. Most of Azula's anger immediately dissipated as she tilted her head slightly in curiosity. "Oh? The great Avatar Aang is finally going to reveal another part of his mysterious past to me." He didn't answer, but walked away. Hungry for more information on the boy, Azula followed, confident that the water tribe idiot wouldn't try to escape. There were too many men on deck watching him. Once they were sufficiently away from any prying ears, mainly Sokka's, Aang stopped and turned to the taller girl. "So? Why have you been defending him so much? Have you been secretly best friends with him from the start?" she asked sarcastically. Aang laughed inwardly. She had no idea how close she was. "It's kind of complicated," he said after a moment. "Remember, a while back, I said that there was something that I couldn't tell you about. He paused. It's related to that. And here I was thinking you were going to tell me something juicy, she said, crossing her arms. Well, I've deduced what your big secret was, anyway. Aang raised an eyebrow, and similarly crossed his arms, amused. You did. Yes, she said, absolutely sure of herself. And I have plenty of evidence. Shoot, said Aang. First, I saw it in your eyes. You always look at me, or Zuko, or Ty Lee, or Sokka with a knowing glance, as if you know something about all of us that we might not, but it's mostly those three. Also, I've seen remorse and sadness in your eyes, as if you've seen things tragically happen to us. Judging from your terrible nightmares, this seems to be correct, since you seem to be reliving those moments. By this time, Aang's heart was hammering against his chest, his grey eyes wide with fear. How could she know these things? In addition, I've noticed a pattern. You seem to be quite ahead of your game, as if you knew beforehand that certain things were going to happen, and judging from your intelligence level, you certainly didn't come up with some of your plans on the dot. You just knew from past experience. You look at everything like you've seen it before. You react to certain things quite unexpectedly, ranging from longing for Sokka to immense hatred for Zhao. You can't have met them before, since you've been stuck in that volcano for 100 years. So, Aang braced himself, his legs as solid as iron, unable to run away from her next words. I've deduced that you're a time traveler. Aang blinked. And burst out into laughter. That's got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. He roared, slapping his knee. A time traveler? Is that even possible? Oh, Azula. He wiped a tear from his eye. You're a riot. Azula jutted out her lower lip, narrowing her amber eyes at him, distinctly annoyed. Well, you don't have to be so overdramatic about it. She huffed, spun around on the ball of her foot, and walked off. She yelled to him over her shoulder. I'll get it one of these days, I swear to you, Avatar boy. As she furthered from him, she spoke in a lower voice, slumping her shoulders in defeat. I thought I had him, too. Aang stopped laughing at her back once she was gone, and immediately turned serious and broody. She had no idea just how close she was. Was Azula always this observant? Or was he just stupid? Was he leaving that much of an obvious trail? He vowed to cover up his tracks better, he was being too risky. For some reason, he just didn't want them to know. Not yet. As soon as the Avatar took Azula away from their captive, Zhang Zhang approached the boy. He was grieving in his own way, the old master noticed. He rarely, if ever, spoke to anyone, despite Aang's efforts to communicate. He did not know why the Avatar was so determined, but his efforts were for naught. Zhang Zhang knew exactly what was bothering the waterbender. He was defeated, for one. 3 other children captured him and forced him onto a Fire Nation ship, making him work and suffer like a slave. He was strangely prideful, for a Water Tribe warrior, and his pride was damaged. Also, he was practically betrayed by his grandmother, someone who loved him and that he trusted. She let him stay with the Avatar as she ran off. Now that she was a traitor to her people, she was on the run. And she was why Zhang Zhang approached the Water Prince. She does love you, you know, the old man muttered. Sokka didn't look up. Who, that firebender witch? He asked sarcastically. I doubt it. And he continued scrubbing. Was Zhang Zhang the only one who noticed that it was the same spot, rubbed over and over and over again? Your grandmother, Kun Na, the firebender stated flatly. She believes this is for the better. Whatever, Sokka mumbled, barely audible. It doesn't change the fact that she betrayed me. View it as you will, Zhang Zhang murmured his assent with a barely perceptible nod. You may emerge from this struggle a stronger person. How? By being forced to live with fire savages. Sokka asked gruffly. He had no idea why he was even responding to this man, but his long-stifled sarcasm was coming to the surface in his anger. It was the only way he could hope to mask his true emotions. Perhaps, the firebending master said enigmatically. Do not let your feelings consume you. Do what you think is best. Sokka didn't respond, but Zhang Zhang didn't say anything further because Azula was returning. When Azula returned to her watch over Sokka, she found Zhang Zhang staring at the boy himself. The two were just quietly regarding each other, but for some reason, Azula felt like she was intruding. Sokka's remaining eye was cold, emotionless. Azula knew he still felt rejected and betrayed because of his grandmother, but she didn't care. Zhang Zhang was harder to read. "What's going on?" Azula asked her master. Sokka averted his gaze and returned to his back-breaking work. Zhang Zhang didn't answer her, he just sighed and rubbed his temples, suddenly looking even older than he did already. Was the man getting weaker? "It's not your place to know, woman," Sokka sneered, speaking for the first time. She glared at him. "Shut up, you sexist bastard," she swore. "My great nation doesn't have your silly tribal traditions, so you have no right to say that to me, your superior." Sokka looked like he was about to attack her, but she settled into a stance. Zhang Zhang shook his head. "Be quiet, both of you," he said sternly. "There is no discipline in children these days." Azula unwillingly obeyed her master, and for some reason, Sokka did, too. What happened between them? She joined her master in quietly watching the water tribesmen beneath her, thinking back to all of their fights against one another, and once, even side by side, as he toiled under the sun, a thin sheen of sweat across his face. As she thought about their fights, she remembered the one at the dragon altar, where she unleashed a torrent of blue flames for the second half of the fight. When she tried again, her flames turned red. She decided to ask her master. "Zhang Zhang," she said to him, foregoing the use of his title, "when I fought him at the dragon altar, I used blue fire. I've never seen it before." The older man seemed deeply disturbed by this. "Can you do it again?" "No," she stated, slightly confused. "My fire reverted back to red afterward." Zhang Zhang exhaled with relief, and his eyes flicked shut. "Good. What does that mean?" the girl questioned. "You fought him more intensely than you have ever fought before," the old man explained. "So much that you were fighting with the intent to kill." Azula's eyes widened, remembering the thrill of the battle and her power-induced craze. "When that happens, a firebender's flame burns blue," he said after a slight pause. Azula wasn't the least bit disturbed. "Can I do that all the time?" Zhang Zhang sighed. "I don't see why you'd want to. That thirst for destruction leads some firebenders down the wrong path. Haven't you noticed that the spirit of destruction, Shao, is blue?" Azula nodded. It did make sense, after all, and the girl thrived on logic. The true essence of firebending is life and harmony. Do not forget my lessons, unless you want your inner fire to consume your being. She bowed. "Thank you, Master Zhang Zhang," she said, uncharacteristically polite. She turned and left, quite intent on learning how to bend blue fire, despite her master's words. She did not forget the power surge she felt and the thrill that came with it. Behind them, Sokka processed the information, carefully storing it away for a different purpose. A grand silver water nation ship cut through the ocean waters beneath it effortlessly, gliding among the tides and redirecting the flow of the seas to propel them faster toward their destination. The ship was currently moving north, into the waters of the Earth Kingdom, having come directly from the southern water tribe city of Ice. However, they were not yet going into enemy territory. Most of the ocean of the world was under their control. The water nation had an unmatched navy, after all. 2 rows of soldiers on deck bowed deeply as their princess appeared, striding confidently down the path they had made for her. She was wearing simple blue robes and loose-fitting slacks, lined with silver, but she also had jewelry of bone and ice, the latter constantly frozen and ready for use as a weapon in times of need. Her brown hair was long, thick, and free, so unlike what regular women customarily did to their hair. Once the princess was in the middle of all of the soldiers, she spoke loudly. "Brave men of the Southern Water Tribe," she spoke, "you have all been called here to aid me in my mission, rescue your prince from the hands of the Avatar, and capture the traitorous Lady Kunna." She paused for a moment. "Fight strong. Rise to the objective like a fierce wave, crashing down on all who stand in our way." Many of the men looked up at her and her rallying words. They felt the excitement of going to battle, not a simple retrieval mission. The princess continued to speak of heroic exploits they would make, of their courage and wit, of their skill and abilities. She had a way with words, known to sway men to her desire. They were in awe of her power, which was so strange for them to feel of a woman. Because of Princess Katara, men felt insatiable urges to thaw the ice in her heart, for no one knew why it was there, but it was evident in her eyes, and women constantly admired her will and drive to make life better for them. Her people loved their princess, and they would die for her whenever they felt it was necessary. And that was just what Katara wanted. Some of you may feel hesitant about fighting alongside a woman, she continued, but many men shook their heads strongly. Don't be, she said coldly. We are just as powerful as the rest of you. If there are any objections, raise your voices now, and we will fight to see who is toughest. She paused for a moment, her blue eyes flitting from side to side. Good, she said finally. Well, then. She shouted triumphantly, prepare to get your prince back home. And as her voice was drowned out by their loud cheers, Katara spun around on the heel of her foot and returned to the inside of her ship. As she was about to open the silver hatch, her companion appeared at her side. You've really got them all wrapped around your little finger, Katara, said Suki, grinning through her white makeup. The Kyoshi warrior looked over the men with her arms crossed, covering her chest plate. She was garbed in the dark green armor of her people, the last of her kind. Her auburn hair was trimmed neatly, and her slightly mischievous eyes seemed to change from shades of blue, to green, and even gray, depending on how you looked at them. Of course. I always do, said Katara, giving her a smirk of equal proportion. Appa was finally loaded up and ready to go, packed with food, clothes, for Aang seemed obsessed with dressing up like Earth Kingdom citizens, and Sokka. Aang, Azula, and Zuko stood on the deck of the ship, along with Zhang Zhang and several of his men and women, ready to depart. Aang and Azula bowed in farewell and thanks to their Saifu. Why can't Ty Lee be here to say goodbye? Zuko asked, not for the first time. Azula rolled her eyes. She can't leave her city again to go to our village, his sister explained to him again, with the air of speaking to a small child. Zhang Zhang and his people were still planning on returning to Zuko and Azula's village to help protect them from war and rebuild, and Ty Lee was forced to stay behind so she could learn how to be a proper ruler of the Golden City. You're pathetically lovesick. The old fire-bending master ignored them and placed both of his hands on Aang's and Azula's shoulders. You have both been good students, he said. Learn from each other. Keep on learning until there is nothing left to learn. Even then, don't stop. Keep your heads about you. The journey ahead is about to get even more dangerous. He offered his advice quickly and then turned to Zuko. I have something for you. Zuko, interested, watched as Zhang Zhang offered him an ornate dual broadsword scabbard, just like his old one, but much nicer. The man unsheathed conjoined swords with golden hilts, and red rubies in the pommel. These were a gift to me from Master Piandao himself, but I never had a use for them. I don't know much about swords, but yours are aged and close to being unusable. Take these and savor them, Zuko. The young warrior gaped, but quickly gathered his wits, accepting the weapons with shaking hands. Thank you, Master Zhang Zhang. Azula frowned. Good luck on your journey, Zhang Zhang said, standing back as the three boarded their bison. Sokka was sitting in the saddle, his hands bound by thick rope, angrily glaring at them all. Say hi to Uncle Iroh for us, Zuko said with a grin, and he and Azula waved as the bison flew into the sky. As they soared, he twisted back into his seat on the saddle. Well, it feels good to get moving again. Oh, please, said Azula, don't tell me you didn't enjoy that extra sword training with the other soldiers. Guys, don't start, said Aang, sitting at the reins, as always. He felt a major headache coming on already. Steadily getting worse. It even got to the point where he had to clutch his head in pain, unable to repress a small moan that escaped his teeth. Zuko noticed. What's up, Aang? He asked in concern. Sokka and Azula didn't seem to care. Just a headache. He mumbled, but they didn't hear him over the roaring wind, which was getting louder and louder, ruffling his hair. The pain pulsed through his head, his eyes blurred to the point where he couldn't distinguish between Appa's horns. Sabashi coiled around his head and chittered in concern, but her tiny sounds echoed like drum beats, and now even Azula was stirring concernedly. But he didn't hear them, closing his eyes and falling back against Appa's fur. He was unconscious. "What's going on?" Zuko asked. "What happened to him?" And then his tattoos started glowing. "The Avatar state!" Azula exclaimed, almost with a tinge of fear. Even Sokka sat up, looking ready to defend himself despite his bound hands and ankles. This was unnecessary, however, because the Avatar lied motionless, and no unusual winds accompanied him. No. He's just entering the spirit world, Azula realized. But why? He didn't need to talk to the spirits. But the spirits needed to talk to him. An old woman oversaw the princess, her light gray eyes nearly covered in wrinkles and her gray hair falling loosely. Her gaze was not lazy. In fact, it was far from it. Her eyes were piercing and she watched the princess like an Arctic hawk. She was the princess teacher, and she was deeply involved with her job. She was garbed in the clothes of a water tribe elder. Katara was currently faced with 4 of her armed soldiers, though they clearly had no desire to hurt her. They were just her puppets in her training exercise. Literally. The waterbender bent her fingers forward, lowering them as she felt something akin to an invisible string connecting her to each of the soldiers. She bent forward, and they did too. Their eyes were wide with fear as she performed the deadly skill. Clearly, they were not expecting this. One blue-clad man went skidding backwards on his heels, swinging his machete at Suki, who was leaning against the balustrade fanning herself with her golden weapons. The man was unable to control his arm as it swung, but the Kyoshi warrior slid one of her fans along his weapon, gently deflecting it to the side and twisting underneath his arm, jabbing him with her other closed fan and sliding her feet against his, knocking the man to the ground. The next man was literally flying at her, levitating several inches off of the ground, swinging his own weapon awkwardly and stiffly. The third was sent at Suki, skidding on the tips of his toes, moving to impale her with a spear. From the background, Katara danced, lifting her arms and twisting her fingers as she controlled all 4 figures at once. While Suki was dealing with 3 of her puppets, she was currently entertaining herself with the last one, twisting his arms and legs grotesquely, trying to see how far they would go before breaking. They were trying to scream, but their mouths were clenched shut. "That's enough, Katara," said her teacher calmly. All 4 soldiers immediately dropped to the ground, their breathing erratic. "Yes, Hama," Katara acquiesced. "How did I do?" she asked, eager to hear praise. "Perfect," said the old woman with a cold grin. "Blood bending without the aid of the full moon is an admirable talent." Suki went back to fanning herself, calmly looking over the fallen soldiers with a triumphant smirk. "Now, we must speak about more important matters. My brother and my grandmother," Katara said with a nod. "What do you suggest?" "A small, elite team," said Hama, her eyes flicking between the 2. "You mean, the 3 of us? Traveling alone?" Suki asked with a hint of distaste. She felt that an old woman would slow them down. "Bah! Of course not," said Hama, waving a hand dismissively at the Kyoshian. "The 2 of you, and a friend." Katara smirked and her eyes twinkled with excitement. Another adventure, a quick one on the side. Anything was better than being cooped up at home, and she took every chance she could to leave, which included donning the blue spirit mask and following her brother as his search for the Avatar became renewed once the boy was discovered. "I've got just the right person in mind." "Aang, it's good to see you again," said an old, benign voice, echoing to him through the mist. "What? Who's there? Where am I?" The Avatar asked the disembodied voice, struggling to see through the heavy mist. Suddenly, a tall form materialized in front of him, and upon seeing the man, Aang knew where he was, the spirit world. "But how?" "I am happy to see that you are doing all right," said Avatar Roku. Aang peered at him curiously. "You said that it was good to see me again. What do you mean?" "You've never met me before," said Aang, eager to avoid another situation where Roku didn't know about the world where Aang really came from. Kuruk didn't. What would make Roku any different? Besides, in this world, Kuruk came immediately before him. "I'm hurt, Aang," Roku said with a small smile. "Did you so easily forget your spiritual advisor?" Aang's eyes widened with surprise. "But it can't be you." Avatar Kuruk didn't know about me. I mean, about the world I really came from. How can it be you? It is me, said Roku, spreading his heavily robed arms wide. I informed you about Sozin's comet. I was the Avatar who truly preceded you. How? What's happening? Did you bring me to the spirit world? One question at a time. I have a lot of things to tell you, said Roku, his voice slightly more stern. Do not interrupt me, since you were not near any spiritual places, I had to drag you directly into your dreams. Because of that, this world around us took no form, he explained, gesturing to the fog around them. Now. Yes, I have come with you, into this world, but only just recently. And it is because of you, Aang. What went wrong? He asked. Well, it is not your fault at all, actually, Roku mused. I came here rather on accident. Let me explain this to you. There are many, many worlds, many different dimensions that all run parallel to each other, occasionally intersecting at places of importance, which makes them spiritually active. All of these worlds revolve and spring forth from one world, the spirit world. Aang's head was spinning again. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? There are even more worlds. So this one isn't just a weird coincidence or a figment of my imagination. He was under the impression that his past lives created it while sending him here, turning the world into a reality. Yes, Roku stated. He closed his eyes, and the fog around them swirled into a myriad of colors, settling still after a moment like water. Let me show you. Aang suddenly found himself back into the mortal world, with Roku at his side. They were standing in the middle of a busy village. Aang was about to ask Roku what was going on, but he soon spotted himself, albeit a bald, younger, innocent version, running down the streets with an unscarred Zuko and Azula at his side. The person they were fleeing, however, appeared right in front of them from a side alley, shooting them with a bullet of water. Sokka. This is the world you've been staying in lately, as it would have been without you interfering. The Vision Aang, grinning, leapt over Sokka and swung his staff, hitting him with a gust of wind from behind. But wait a moment, Roku interrupted him, and the mist swirled again, and this time Aang was greeted with a vision of the same town. But now, a younger Aang was running with Sokka and Katara at his side, facing down a scarred, banished Prince Zuko. Aang gaped. He remembered this moment. That's not all, said Roku. This was his own world, and he recognized it well. The mist swirled again, and now he was greeted with an image of Azula, Katara, and Sokka working side by side, the former two with their bending against Aang himself. Air swept from his fingers, striking both Katara and Azula, and it hurt him to see himself causing pain to the people he cared about. 4 unrecognizable air nomads appeared at his side, sweeping their staves at Sokka. No! Aang shouted. The mist swirled again. He was almost afraid to look, but now he was introduced to a soundless scene of someone who was clearly Earth King Ki facing down Aang, Zuko, Sokka, Azula, and Katara, all ready to attack the king. He stepped back, and a smaller figure appeared from the shadows, Toph. She attacked them all. And that was how it went. Aang witnessed several combinations of his friends battling against each other, forming different teams and alliances. Sometimes Aang was a villain and sometimes he was a hero. He witnessed the world as it might have been with different nations invading all the others. Sometimes Mai, Ty Lee, Suki, Haru, Jet, and many other friends and allies were thrown in. He watched them all with a stony gaze. These are all different situations that might have come to be, but they are all happening at different times and at different places. You could have been at the core of any one of them, Roku explained calmly. What is the point of this? Aang asked. He didn't want to see this anymore. It is necessary for you to understand, because something unprecedented happened. Zuko dragged Aang's unmoving body into the saddle, and he moved to the reins in his place. There was nothing to worry about. They would continue on their course to the Earth Kingdom until the Avatar came back from his spiritual journey. With his one eye, Sokka did nothing else except for carefully observing the Avatar's firebender as she carefully watched his unmoving body, occasionally glancing at Sokka as if to say, "You touch him, and you die." Luckily, the Water Prince wasn't perturbed by such a threat. He could grab the Avatar now, very easily. The older boy was on the bison's head, currently paying more attention to wrestling a map to prevent it from flying away. The stupid little lemur, which looks pretty appetizing, Sokka thought, was fretting over the motionless avatar and would be rather pointless to consider in his plans. Not even the firebender would be a threat. If she tried firebending, her flames would be swept away by the roaring winds all around them before they could even harm the waterbender. And the interfering acrobat was no longer even a factor. With one quick movement, while the girl was watching the avatar, Sokka made his move, grabbing the avatar by the neck and pulling him close, in a position to choke him to death with the rope binding his hands. Predictably, the girl rose to attack before he even touched the airbender, but her fist of flames was eaten away by the wind, dissipating into nothing far behind them. Sokka smirked, circling his finger and creating a dagger of ice from the air, holding it in position near the boy's neck. Azula wisely understood the threat and sat back, glaring venomously at him. "Looks like I got my prize," Sokka taunted. "That was a cheap move," she said, gritting her teeth with anger. Zuko apparently heard the movements on the saddle and looked at the two of them, and then at Aang in Sokka's arms. He sent an equally venomous glare at the waterbender. "Like that's not beneath you," Sokka noted. "That stupid firebending scroll incident comes to mind. Most of the battles between the two consisted of trickery, and in different situations, the girl sometimes surprised him and came out on top even without a mastery of her art. Now, she had the addition of power on her side. She was a worthy opponent, and he grinned knowingly while she continued to glare. Now, you have two choices." He pressed the knife of ice into the boy's neck. "Let the avatar die, or let me go free the moment we get to the Earth Kingdom." With any luck, he'd get the avatar too. It should be an easy choice. "If it was up to me, it would be," Azula said, reclining in her seat and examining her nails. "I never wanted you here in the first place." "Very well. Zuko, keep going to the Earth Kingdom," she commanded her brother. She had a plan, though it was one based on chance and not very effective. It simply involved waiting for Aang to awaken, since she could do nothing. If he woke up before getting to the Earth Kingdom, well, they would be okay. If not, then Sokka would win. Zuko nodded, and from the look in his eyes she knew that he had the same thing in mind. "What happened?" Aang asked Roku with wide eyes. "It should instead be said, what is happening," said Roku. "Ever since the other Avatar spirits and I sent you here, something else happened that we didn't plan. It was Enma and Koh who informed us of our mistake. Aang did nothing. This couldn't be good. By leaving your own world and coming to this one, we have all affected the balance of all the worlds." "What do you mean? What might happen?" "They are intersecting more than ever before," Roku said gravely. "Even the spirit world is feeling repercussions. It is no longer in balance, and things will only get worse. To explain it simply, your own world is trying to pull you back, crossing the boundaries into this world in the process. I am one of the results. Normally, I would not be able to speak to you now. Instead, a different avatar Roku would be. It is also why I was able to pull you into the spirit world so easily." "That doesn't sound good," Aang observed dumbly. Roku shook his head. "It gets far worse. Right now, your home world is in a state of suspension." "What?" Aang bellowed. "Do not worry. The other spirits managed to save them for now. Things can return to normal, but only once you are back where you belong. So take me back," Aang ordered. "I can't do that," Roku said sadly. "Not yet. The two worlds haven't completely merged yet, but they will. It is only at that moment that you may return home. But things might get dangerous along the way. You may see some odd similarities with your home world and things manifesting themselves here. I do not know what the outcome would be, but the worlds will be interfering with each other more and more over time." "What should I do?" Aang asked. "Keep doing what you have been doing. Try to save this world from the war before the arrival of Sirius Moon. If not, if you fail, the balance may be damaged even further, throwing both worlds into chaos and, eventually, nothingness," Roku said chillingly. "Great." Now there were two worlds on his shoulders. "I won't let that happen. I can't. I will not fail again. Aang protested angrily, clenching his fist. Roku gave a small, gentle smile, slowly fading away into the mist, his voice backed by the thousands of other Avatar spirits. We believe in you, Aang. The glow of power in his arrows died out as he entered the mortal world once again, feeling a cold object pressed against his throat, as well as a constricting substance that was affecting his breathing. The tan, strong arms holding him stiffened upon seeing the glow in his arrows fade, but Aang's reflexes were faster, throwing burning waves of heat off of his body, melting the icy knife slightly. A barrier of air exploded outwards from his body, throwing the other body off of him. Quick as an owlcat, he spun on Appa's saddle and took a stance, but Sokka was nearly thrown off of the bison. The Water Prince settled himself back into his seat, recognizing his defeat. Everything was silent on the bison. Seibashi even froze. That went well, Azula said matter-of-factly. That was probably the easiest fight with him ever. If you haven't noticed, there's not much I can do on the back of a bison hundreds of feet in the air with my hands tied and no useful weapons, Sokka shot back. Aang grinned, and relaxed, suddenly feeling the strain of being in the spirit world. What happened? Why were you in the spirit world? Zuko asked hurriedly, ignoring Sokka and Azula. Aang quickly thought up a lie. They told me about the Avatar state, the boy said. I'm not supposed to do it too much. Bad stuff happens. Right, Azula said, crossing her arms disbelievingly. This has to do with that thing you can't tell us yet, right? Aang grinned sheepishly. Things quietly settled back to a semblance of normal, but Aang let Zuko drive Appa as he contemplated his journey into the spirit world. Sokka went to brooding and Azula continued to glare at the waterbender. Seibashi curled in Aang's lap. Aang silently regarded them all, running his fingers along the sheath of his sword, its true owner sitting just a few feet away from him. He thought of all the changes he made, saving Ty Lee's life and capturing Sokka, hoping to change him for the better. The stakes were higher this time, now that the fates of two worlds, and perhaps the spirit world, were on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail. It was still a second chance, nonetheless. Chapter 2, The Cave of Two Lovers. Fear and loathing gripped his veins as Zuko was bashed aside forcefully, falling unconscious as he hit burned debris, springing black ash into the air. Aang went on the offense against the vicious firebender, blasting her with as little mercy as she gave the rest of the Earth Kingdom. After the comet came, the Earth Kingdom was little more than ash and death, and only Ba Sing Se stood, though it was under control of the Fire Nation anyway. The Avatar and the Order of the White Lotus only served as a feeble distraction to the Fire Nation, which only impeded Ozai from unleashing his wrath on the eastern lands. Instead, they fought him in his homeland, and lost, while Azula was sent to do the deed against the Earth Kingdom. As a result, it was burned completely to the ground. Aang kept using the circular movements of the dancing dragon form, swatting aside Azula's fiery attacks as he imitated a real dragon. At any given moment, he was able to transition into airbending attacks easily because of the similar movements, and he used them to great effect. Why are you still fighting? Azula asked him scornfully, once she was a safe distance away. There's nothing left to fight for. You already lost. Not yet. Aang shot back, stomping boulders up from the ground and launching them at her. No matter how difficult things get, we'll always be here to fight back against you, Azula. She kicked aside one of the boulders and dodged the others, but glared in response to his words. No matter how many of us you take down, one of us will take up the mantle and continue the fight. He attacked again, using a gust of wind to kick up a burnt piece of wood at her. And even if we're all defeated by you. He relentlessly forced her back with a charged blast of fire. Someone will take our place. The fighting will never end. You'll never win over the whole world. Azula's visage displayed her absolute fury, jumping back far enough away to evade his latest attack. You're a fool, Avatar. A dead, cooked fool. Putting on a mask of calm, Azula began to slowly circle her arms, drawing on her positive and negative energies. In response, Aang calmly readied himself for the attack. Lightning shot from her fingertips with the sound of an explosion, streaking for Aang. The Avatar guided it to his own fingertip, drawing it in closer to his body, absorbed by his left hand and down into his stomach. The power felt just as intense as wielding his own lightning, but this had the added element of danger. But he was not afraid. After passing it through his stomach, carefully avoiding his heart, he led the energy out through his right hand, sending it exploding back towards Angela. Amber eyes wide with surprise, she propelled herself to the side with her characteristic blue flames as it shot harmlessly into the sky. "Dear Zuzu taught you that little trick, didn't he?" the girl assumed, narrowing her eyes at him. "You're going to die today." "Maybe," said Aang. "But whatever happens, this battle will not end until you and Oze are defeated. Wake up, Aang." Zuko only got a muffled groan in return, but he continued to shake the boy until he blearily opened his eyes. "What?" he moaned. "We need to get moving," Zuko told him. "I feel uneasy here." After a moment, he said, "And we can't get Sokka to wake up. Maybe he's dead." Angela cackled, her voice further away than Zuko's on the other side of camp. Aang sighed into his pillow. "Sokka's always like that," he mumbled. "What did you just say?" Angela asked inquisitively, coming closer to the younger boy. Aang shot up, suddenly remembering where he was. "I said, Sokka is like a sloth cat," he said slowly. Angela was skeptical. As Aang fully woke up, he scanned his surroundings quickly for any sign of danger, and sorely missed his seismic senses, which made that job much easier. They were in the Earth Kingdom. The four camped on a barren, rocky area, closed in by unearthed boulders from a possible earthbender at a previous time. Zuko and Angela, who always woke up earliest, had a campfire going, and Zuko had put a pot of breakfast over the open flames. Sokka, as Zuko and Angela said, was still sleeping like a log. "Good luck trying to wake him up," said Zuko, who had returned to tend the fire and the pot of breakfast. "We tried." Suddenly getting a devious idea, Aang smirked and shuffled out of his own sleeping bag, picking up a long, dry stick from the ground. "What are you doing with that?" Angela asked curiously. "Are you going to poke his other eye out?" "No. Watch," Aang said, shooting a grin at her. Quietly and carefully, he tread over to the sleeping waterbender and poked him several times with the stick, and then snaked it down his sleeping bag. Pretending to be alarmed, Aang shouted out, "Sokka, look out! There's a prickle snake in your sleeping bag." The water prince let out a very girlish shout and spasmed in his sleeping bag, attempting to get out of it as fast as he could in a wild and confused panic, disrupting Sabashi's own state of rest. Meanwhile, Aang, Angela, and Zuko all burst out into laughter at his antics. Once the waterbender finally accomplished getting out of his sleeping bag, he glared darkly at them all, unable to do anything with his hands still bound by rope. "Aang!" Angela roared with laughter, clutching her stomach, "That's got to be the funniest thing I've ever seen. I didn't know you had it in you." Aang's laughter died down at Sokka's angered expression and he just grinned sheepishly at Angela. "Well, that was a wonderful morning greeting," Sokka spat at them. "I didn't know you were all so childish." Angela sobered at his comment. "We're not childish, we just don't have a stick up our guys," Zuko warned. "Stop fighting." "Well, everyone," Aang spoke up, "before things could escalate further, since we're in the Earth Kingdom, it's time to start blending in." "What do you mean?" Angela asked warily, turning her head only slightly away from Sokka to look at him. "We've all got to wear Earth Kingdom clothes," he said, trying to make it sound as exciting as possible. "Why?" Zuko asked curiously. "I like showing that I'm from the Fire Nation, especially since we're somewhere new. It's safer to blend in than to hide out, as I always say," Aang explained. "It's dangerous here, more so since I'm a potential target. And that'll endanger the rest of you." "No way, you're just being paranoid," Angela said, crossing her arms. "We're perfectly fine." Aang offered her another sheepish grin. "Just humor me, guys. Please." Zuko rubbed his temples, sighing. "Fine, but where are we going to get Earth Kingdom clothes?" Aang grinned excitedly and jumped up on Appa, fishing through their luggage. Dramatically, he drew out clothes of browns and greens. "I took the honors of picking them for you." Angela raised an eyebrow. Where'd you get those? Aang's expression quickly turned serious. That's not important, he said, deadpan. There is no way I'm playing along with your stupidity, said Sokka, finally speaking up. Why wouldn't I want you to be found? It's either that or violent death by Earth Kingdom troops if you're ever found, Aang pointed out to him. You're their enemy, and you stand out in blue. Give me those, Sokka demanded. His face turned to one of mock innocence. But I'll need my hands untied to dress myself properly. Don't count on it. It'll be fun to see you struggle, said Azula, grinning madly. When they were all finished dressing, Aang stood back to examine them all. Great job, guys. You all look like regular, everyday Earth Kingdom citizens and refugees. Yay, Sokka said without emotion. I've always wanted to play dress up. Sokka was clothed in a sleeveless light green vest, lined with yellow and a matching belt. With brown pants and brown boots, he didn't stand out at all. However, his hands were still tied and he was weaponless. Aang realized he had to do something about the former. This is, actually pretty cool, Zuko admitted. He was wearing a long, sleeveless, tattered brown coat that extended almost to his knees, folded and tight over his torso but loosening as it reached past his waist. Sleeves from unseen underclothes extended down his arms, which were tied down tightly at his wrists so they wouldn't get in the way when he was wielding his blades. Lighter brown pants and black boots completed his newer look. His latest golden broadswords gifted to him by Zhang Zhang looked oddly out of place, but it wasn't too bad, Aang mused. Guess my hairpiece just screams that I'm Fire Nation, right? Azula asked, slowly taking the golden ornament out of her hair. She was wearing a dark tunic with the Earth Kingdom emblem on it over a short-sleeved green shirt. Cloth bracers covered her wrists. The tunic extended past her yellow belt, covering part of her front and light brown pants tucked into her boots. In addition, she had a yellow collar. She had decided to put her hair back up into a full top knot. Here, use this, he said, handing her a lime green bow. She snatched it from his hands and tied it into her top knot. It gave her the deceitful appearance of an innocent girl. How do I look, Mr. Poofy Pants? She asked suggestively. Aang was unable to stop the color from rising into his face, but whether it was from her question or her embarrassing new nickname for him, he didn't know. He himself was garbed in a typical earthbending student's uniform, though it was sleeveless. And, indeed, his white pants were poofy. However, they were tapered at his ankles, bearing them slightly, since he was only wearing regular shoes. You look good, he said cautiously. Azula dropped her act. That's it? She asked, pouting angrily. Sokka. Aang said, diverting a crisis. You can't have that warrior's wolf tail. You need an Earth Kingdom hairstyle. Sokka peered at him piercingly. How did you know what this was called? And no, I'm not cutting this off. I know styles from all the nations, Aang countered. I'm the Avatar and a nomad, remember? He scratched his chin. Well, you don't have enough hair for a top knot, since the sides and back of your head are shaved. Wait, Aang, Zuko stopped him. The styles you say you know were around 100 years ago. Things have most likely changed since then. Trust me, they haven't, Aang said. Sokka didn't seem to care at Zuko's mention of Aang being around a century before. Anyway, Sokka, let's try this. Wah. Before he could finish his sentence, Aang plucked out his hair tie, letting his brown hair fall to the sides, covering the shaved part. Sokka was unable to stop his advance, considering his hands were still bound. Azula snorted with laughter. That looks so stupid. Ugh. No. I'm not staying like this. I look ridiculous. Sokka complained immediately after. Too bad, Aang said with a note of finality. Besides, once you let your hair grow out, it'll look better. You make it sound like I'm going to be with you guys permanently, Sokka glowered. That's not happening. You're all idiotic and weak. Azula stepped forward menacingly, red fire sprouting from her clenched fists. Don't talk to Aang like that. Zuko went between both of them, holding his hands out to keep them an arm's length away. Guys, stop fighting. You haven't stopped since Sokka joined us. Azula, stop making fun of him, and Sokka. I thought you were more mature than that. He turned to Aang. Aang, stop antagonizing him and fooling around. We have to get moving. You said you wanted to go to Omashu, right? Aang, stunned, was only able to nod. Azula didn't back down. What about Sokka? He's saying crap about us. She protested. And Aang's not antagonizing him. That's my job. Fine, I'll behave, Mom, as long as she shuts up, Sokka said to Zuko, pointing at Azula. Sokka, Azula, just stop it, Aang said, feeling small. Zuko's right. We have to get to Omashu. Why do you want to go there anyway? Azula asked, turning on him. I just want to check it out. I used to have a friend there, he said. Sokka crossed his arms, narrowing his one eye. That's pointless. Omashu has been in ruins for several years. And Aang. Your friends from 100 years ago probably aren't around anymore, Zuko said quietly. Aang grinned and gave him a thumbs up. Trust me. I know he's alive. Bumi's got a lot in him. Whatever you say, said Sokka. Fine. Let's go then. I'm tired of staying here. Optimistic Aang scares me, Azula commented to her brother as they moved on to Appa. From the top of the bison, Zuko was able to survey their surroundings. Shielding his eyes from the sun, he shouted to Aang, who was still on the ground. Hey, I see some travelers. Intrigued, Aang jumped to Appa's head, trying to spot the people Zuko saw. As he was able to identify them, his stomach dropped. Oh, no. What? Azula asked, interested. Let's go. Come on guys, we're leaving, Aang hurried them. Sokka, you especially. Get up here. Are they bad? Zuko asked the Avatar, gripping the hilt of his broadsword. Sort of, Aang told him. In another time, in another world, Aang might have had patience for them, but now he was different. Quickly. Before they spot us. The group of people was coming closer. By pure luck, the Avatar and his companions weren't spotted yet. Whoa, look. Travelers. One of the newcomers shouted, surprised. Too late. No, Aang moaned. The colorful band approached the remains of Aang's camp, greeting them happily. Hi. I'm Chong, and this is Lily, and that's Moku. We're singing Nomads. Aang's expression was one of horror. Don't fall in love with the traveling girl. She'll leave you broke, and broken-hearted. Aang didn't know how he got into this situation. The traveling musicians insisted that they come along with them, since life in the Earth Kingdom wildlands was dangerous now and a bunch of little kids would need protection and entertainment. Aang supposed that somewhere, deep down, he was compassionate enough to not outright abandon them and fly away to Omashu. Besides, traveling with the annoying, constantly singing musicians would be worth it if they were going to the Cave of Two Lovers, which he now suspected since it was on the way to Omashu. He had pleasant memories there. With Katara. Forlornly, he glanced at Azula. Katara wasn't here. And, suddenly, feeling absolutely crazy, Aang imagined something similar happening to him and Azula, drawing in close to kiss her pearly white, beautiful face. Love shines brightest in the dark. This is torture, Sokka said, drawing Aang out of his thoughts. He didn't know what to make of them. This is the worst thing you could have possibly done to me, Sokka continued, but Aang was only half listening as the singers continued on in the background. Winter, spring. Summer and fall. Winter, spring. Summer and fall. 4 seasons. 4 loves. 4 seasons. 4 love. And this has got to be the most boring landscape I've ever seen, Sokka complained again. The land around them was barren, a few lifeless husks of trees dotted the otherwise flat land, surrounded by mountainous regions. The travelers were currently walking through a small crevice, leading to the mountain paths. At these words, Aang glared at the water prince. Shut up, Aang said to him harshly. Your own people did this. They sucked the land dry with their waterbending because of your stupid war. They can't grow their crops. I bet so many animals died off. And it's all your fault. Not my fault personally, Sokka retorted, giving him an equally cold glare. It's our way of sharing our greatness with the rest of the world. As he said it, he didn't sound convinced of his own words. Yeah, by destroying lives? I thought you were smarter than that, Sokka. Your people hurt and killed innocents. You'll see. We're bound to come upon some hapless village soon. And with those dark words, Aang walked ahead of Sokka, leaving him to his contemplations. As they rounded another bend, the mountain paths opened up to reveal a river, the first sign of fresh water they had seen since entering the Earth Kingdom. But the river was red with blood, for a battle between Earth Kingdom and Water Tribe troops was happening. There were few soldiers on each side, but there were definitely enough to cause a considerable amount of havoc. Earthbenders were hidden behind trenches while the Waterbenders made their stand at the riverside with walls of ice. And the 7 travelers were caught right in the middle of it. Oh, man. This doesn't look too happy, Chong mused. Lily and Moku looked scared, but Aang and the others were on alert. A boulder almost crushed Lily and Azula, but a powerful blast of wind knocked it away from them. Don't attack me. I'm on your side. I'm your prince. Sokka shouted to the waterbenders, jumping up and down as spikes of ice were shot from the wet ground at their enemies. Azula dispelled this attack with a burst of fire while Aang hit Sokka with a strong wind, if only to shut him up. The cave of 2 lovers should be that way, said Chong, as easygoing as ever as he pointed across the battlefield in what seemed like a random direction. What's that? Zuko asked the older man, his broadswords out and ready. Lily began to sing in response. 2 lovers, forbidden from one another. Now is not the time. Sokka shouted at her exasperatedly. Rocks and ice were continually hurled in their direction. Let's get to the caves, they're our only option now, said Azula. Zuko, Sokka, Chong, Lily, Moku, get in the middle, she commanded. Aang and I will hold them off. And at that, Zuko was the first to rush across the battlefield, pulling an unwilling Sokka after him. The singing nomads seemed to follow along at a leisurely pace, as if in a daze. Aang and Azula were on either side of Appa, deflecting the crossfire as they dashed into the middle of the fighting. Aang had no idea where Sabashi was, he hoped she was flying to safety. The Earthbenders think we're an enemy. Aang yelled to Zuko. All because they heard Sokka shouting. And because of their luck, the Waterbenders didn't stop their attack because they didn't hear Sokka's shout. Zuko pointed ahead with his sword, noting where the clearing narrowed into a mountain path again. There. We can use that as cover. Aang protected the rear as the others ran for safety, but he feared that they would run into a dead end. He didn't know what to feel when Zuko yelled that he spotted the cave mouth. A trio of Earth Kingdom soldiers followed them, intent on capturing the enemy's prince. 2 of the soldiers charged at Aang with their spears, but Aang unsheathed his own sword and swatted the enemy weapons aside, channeling fire up and down his blade. The 3rd soldier shifted the ground beneath his feet, pushing the avatar back. Looking behind him to see Appa scurry into the cave after the others, Aang turned back to the soldiers, ready to attack, but the 3 launched boulders at the cave mouth. They were causing a cave-in. No! Aang shouted, forsaking the battle with the soldiers to run after his friends. With the speed only an airbender possessed, he dashed into the cave right as rocks fell, preventing their means of escape. He was met with instant darkness and loud noises as the rocks shifted into place. Once everything was quiet, a flame popped into existence in Azula's palm, and Aang followed suit. To his surprise, he and Azula were the only ones there. Where is everyone? Aang asked, searching for his friends and the singing nomads. Further in the cave, but there was another cave-in, and we were split off from them, Azula said. At least, that's what I think happened. I stayed near the mouth to make sure you got in here okay. Thanks, Azula. I'm glad I'm not completely alone, he said, smiling at her. Don't get mushy on me, she reprimanded him, but the darkness hid her blush. It's kind of funny, we're the only 2 firebenders, so the others must be stumbling around in the darkness. Ha! I wish I could see them. Well, we won't be seeing anybody unless we get out of here, Aang said. Let's hope they get out safely. You know, For a supposed master of strategizing, you sure are an idiot. Zuko yelled at Sokka. Why did you shout to the whole world who you were? You almost got us killed. I couldn't care less if you guys got killed, Sokka replied, refusing to meet Zuko's eye. The cavern was lit by the torchlight of the nomads, who were watching the scene with mild interest. Well, if you didn't notice, you were being attacked too. Zuko growled and clenched his fist, trying to contain his anger. And for all I know, Azula and Aang were probably crushed in the cave-in. Oh, don't let the cave-in get you down. Don't let the falling rocks turn your smile into a frown. When the tunnels are darkest, that's when you need a clown, hey. Don't let the cave-in get you down, Zuko. Chong continued singing happily, strumming away on his pipa. Lily danced and shook her tambourines as Moku beat on his large drums. And I'm about to kill these musicians, Sokka muttered. Zuko, completely ignoring them, punched the rock wall separating them from Aang and Azula, nearly breaking his hand. He clenched his teeth in pain. Sabashi chittered sadly from around Moku's neck. Doesn't look like anyone else is doing anything to get us out of here, Sokka mused to himself. Guess it's up to me. He turned to the broody and angry Zuko. Hey, mind cutting the rope that's tying my hands together? I can't exactly do anything to help like this. Why do you want to help? Zuko's voice was hoarse. Listen, I want to get out of here as much as you do, and since no one else is stepping up to the plate, it's my job to come up with the ideas. Now, cut these, Sokka explained, holding out his wrists to Zuko. He wanted to get out of here badly. He wasn't sure how long he'd be able to stand the company of the annoying singers. Zuko, however, seemed to be able to tolerate them, if he didn't have the ability to outright ignore them. Why should I trust you? You'd probably just turn on us. Sokka rolled his eye. Whatever. Fine, let's rot in here for all I care. Zuko handed his torch off to Chong, and before Sokka could blink, the warrior unsheathed one of his swords and cut the rope effortlessly. Grinning, Sokka stretched his arms and tore off the remains of the rope, rubbing his sore wrists. Let's get crackin'. Aang pulled at the heavy, round, wooden door in an effort to make it budge, while Azula stood off to the side, providing him light but otherwise letting him do all the work. Appa moaned mournfully and impatiently behind them, getting edgy in the tunnels. In retrospect, Aang figured it was probably this experience that made Appa afraid of small spaces in his own world. Appa snorted, and suddenly, he charged at the door that Aang struggled to open. Aang let out a panicked shout and jumped out of the way, even pushing Azula to safety. Their flames went out for a moment, but Appa succeeded in making an opening. Aang stood and brushed himself off, lighting another fire in his palms. Thanks for helping me back up, Aang, Azula said, annoyed. He could tell she was getting irritated in the cave. Apparently, she liked them as much as Appa. Standing, she looked into the new room that Appa opened. What is this place? She asked, letting light enter. It's a tomb, Aang stated, hopping into the chamber. He held up his flame to the monolithic carving of the two lovers in an eternal kiss. The two sarcophagi lay in peace not far away. Whose? Azula wondered. Probably the two lovers. He suggested, raising an eyebrow. Look, there's an inscription beneath the carving. Shooting a glare at him, Azula approached the carving and read aloud the story of the two lovers. As she read, Aang was brought back to the moment alone he shared with Katara. Love is brightest in the dark, Azula read. She scoffed. That's got to be the corniest thing I've ever heard. She frowned when Aang didn't laugh. Still, that's a pretty tragic love story. I guess, Aang said. He almost had his first kiss with Katara here. You know, I just had this crazy idea. What? Azula asked. Aang seemed to say his words slowly and carefully, but he wasn't fixed on her. Instead, he looked up at the carving, appearing contemplative, and a little sad. What if we kissed? You're bad at ideas, Moku pointed out to Sokka. Sokka held a piece of parchment in front of his face, trying to map out the tunnels that they had already traversed. However, things seemed to be changing. Why don't you help? He shot at Zuko, who was walking uselessly at his side. Aren't you good with maps? I'm good at reading them, not making them, Zuko told him, his voice emotionless. I'm good with maps. Chang exclaimed. What? Really? Sokka asked, unable to mask his surprise. No, not really, Chang said. But I'm good at singing. Don't sing again, Sokka said sternly, clearly very angry about the crowd he was forced with. He still couldn't believe his grandmother would do this to him. Before they could argue further, the group heard a deep rumbling from within the cave, progressively getting louder. Something was coming for them. Sokka lowered into a battle stance, but he was useless without his weapons or a source of water. His club, machete, and boomerang were with the stupid bison, which was with the Avatar and the firebender. And suddenly, some kind of monster burst from the rock walls, showering them all with debris and stones and dust. Together, Zuko and Sokka subconsciously hugged each other in fear and screamed at the tops of their lungs, facing this newest monstrosity. Behind them, another creature burst through the tunnel, causing the two to scream again. As they did, they both realized what they were doing and jumped away from each other as if burned, letting out expressions of disgust. That never happened, Zuko said. Agreed, said Sokka. The waterbender stumbled backwards as the musicians ran around in a blind panic, but the prince landed on Chang's discarded pipa, causing a single note to ring out in the cave. Sokka scuttled away from the instrument, but the creatures, badger moles, Sokka realized, seemed to halt for a moment, as if affected by the musical note. Do that again. Zuko shouted to Sokka. I can't. I can't see in the dark. Now, Zuko had the only lit torch. Grumbling, and hurrying to the instrument before the badger moles attacked again, Zuko held his torch to the floor to search it out. Instead, he found one of Moku's many instruments, a Tsunji horn. He struggled to put the stupid thing on, but the badger moles were getting restless again. Sing something. Zuko shouted vaguely, trying to fit the large wind instrument around him. I don't know any songs. Sokka responded, coming nearly face to face with the second badger mole. He could feel its breath on his face. Make something up. The badger moles coming toward me. The big, bad badger moles, who work in the tunnels. Ugh, you're hopeless. Zuko shouted, but the strange instrument finally fit in place, wrapped around him snugly. He blew a long, single note. The badger moles halted again. And, warily, Zuko began to sing something he used to hear from his uncle. It's a long, long way to Ba Sing Se. But the girls in the city, they look so pretty. And they kiss so sweet that you've really got to meet the girls from Ba Sing Se. Right on. The power of music. Chang said breezily. And I think I know that song. Not really. Sokka, I can't blow on this thing and sing at the same time. Help me. Zuko hurriedly whispered to the waterbender. It's a long, long way to Ba Sing Se. And the two sang together to placate the angry beasts, unsurely at first, but gaining confidence as they went. Yeah. Take it away, guys. Chang said, cheering them on. His white flowery necklace made him stand out in the darkness. You can help, you know. Sokka whispered urgently to them. I feel like an idiot. I don't sing, I dance, said Lily, pointing to herself. And I don't sing either. I play the drums, said Moku. Sokka slapped his forehead. They're pretty tame, Sokka mused. Guess the music works pretty well. Get them to lead us out of here, he told Zuko, who nodded and continued to play the Tsunji horn. The three musicians played their instruments in tune with the song, following along lackadaisically after them as they played for the audience of badger moles. Chang was singing a totally different song, however, but the badger moles didn't seem to care. Two lovers, forbidden from one another. A war divides their people, and a mountain divides them apart. Built a path to be together. A kiss. Azula asked him, bewildered. You mean you really believe in this stuff? It's worth a try, Aang said. He couldn't believe he was going through with this. They do say to let love lead the way. But, Aang. Azula pointed out, we're not in love. Maybe not. But it's worth a try anyway, Aang said with conviction. He had never kissed another girl before, only Katara, but she never returned them. She didn't want to get in the way of his duties. What would it be like, if the kiss was mutual? Do you want this? You mean do I want to kiss you? She asked for clarification. That's absurd. Only in a life or death situation. She chuckled nervously. This is as close as it gets to a life or death situation, Aang mentioned, giving an uneasy smile. Would it be the same, to kiss Azula? She suddenly seemed childish, in a way. She twirled one of her bangs and shuffled her feet. It suddenly occurred to Aang how cute she looked with that green bow in her hair. He had never seen her like this, in this kind of light. Love is brightest in the dark. Katara's words continued to echo in his head, as if mocking him, or reminding him of her. He didn't know. It was weird, but he felt as if she was there with them. Fine. We'll continue through the tunnels and see if we can find a way out, Aang said, but little did he know, Azula seemed as if she had just steeled herself for a possible kiss. What? She stuttered, caught unawares. Let's keep going, Aang repeated. There was another tunnel branching off from the tomb chamber, which they followed. Appa was still right behind them. They were both silent, but Aang kept hearing Katara, repeating the same words, over and over and over. As if giving him a hint. His eyes widened, remembering a crucial fact. Azula. What? She asked, alarmed. Put your fire out, he said, clenching a fist over his own flame. Why? Just do it, he ordered, and she complied without another question, surprisingly. Aang looked up at the ceiling, which was not glowing at all. I thought that it would work. What are you talking about, Aang? Azula asked him. In the pitch-black darkness, he felt her hand search for his, and he clasped it for reassurance. And that was when he heard it, deep in the ground, they felt an unnerving rumbling. Aang and Azula both tensed, lighting fires in their free hands, their other ones still held together. A very welcome creature burst through the rock walls to their left, and another immediately followed to the right. They shielded their eyes with their free arms, coughing until the dust settled. Azula. Aang. They heard a voice shout. Zuzu. Azula questioned, and the two saw the swordsman emerging from the dust, wrapping his younger sister in a fierce hug. I thought you two were dead. Zuko mumbled into her shoulder. We're fine, Zuzu, she responded, patting him awkwardly on the back, her hands free from Aang. Now get off, you're embarrassing me. Hey, it's you two again. Chong pointed out. Aang ignored him. Instead, his attention was focused on Appa, who initially regarded the badger moles with caution, but he was warming up to them. Seibashi was reunited with the bison. These badger moles found us, Zuko explained to Aang. And they're leading us out of here. It's the power of music. Chong put in. Come on, can we get going? Sokka asked jadedly from atop one of the badger moles. I want to get out of here. Now. Sokka's been acting strange. You'd never believe it unless you saw it, Zuko whispered to Aang. Aang grinned as they followed the tunnel, the three gigantic creatures leading the way. The singing nomads continued harping about secret tunnels, much to the dismay of the kids, but they soon came upon a dead end, which was crumbled by the badger moles. Light flooded into the tunnel. They were free. Appa was the first to romp out into the sunlight, jumping up and down joyfully and enjoying the fresh air. Seibashi flew in circles above him. Finally! Sokka exclaimed, removing himself from the badger mole. He was putting this day near the top of his worst experiences ever list. Bye, you dumb nomads. Bye. Lily said cheerfully, beginning to walk away. It was fun traveling with you all. Hope to see you again soon. Said Moku, following after her. Listen, dudes, said Chong to the four, don't overplan too much. Just take things as they come. Go wherever the wind takes you, and just go with the flow. He grinned at Aang. Master Arrowhead, it was a pleasure to play with you. I didn't play. Aang, just let him be, Zuko interjected. Just go play your songs, Sokka told them, exasperated. As the four watched the three nomads leave, singing a song as they went, Aang's thoughts wandered again to Katara, and then Azula. Azula glanced to Aang out of the corner of her eye, her cheeks reddening slightly. Zuko thought of the strange waterbender that was now with them, who he thought wasn't as bad as he seemed after all. Even if you're lost you can't lose the love because it's in your heart. Ah, wait. Zuko exclaimed, turning to Sokka. He's free from the rope. Aang barely even glanced at Sokka. Just leave him, Aang stated. He'll be fine. Sokka smirked. I'll be a good boy, don't you worry. Why the sudden change in attitude? Azula asked disbelievingly. Just trying to get your guard down, Sokka told them matter-of-factly. Aang smirked. Same unpredictable Sokka. Well, you're bad at it, Azula said, and the two began to banter again. Leaving Zuko to split them up, Aang walked to the top of the hill that was overlooking his destination. He was going to see the ruins of Omashu with his own eyes. Chapter 3, The Ruins of Omashu. I can't believe it. I know the war has spread far, but Omashu always seemed untouchable. A gentle rain started to fall. He couldn't believe it. This is what it had been reduced to. At least before, the Earth Kingdom city was inhabited by the Fire Nation, but now it was empty, a ruin. Nobody lived here now. From across the canyon, near the exit from the Cave of Two Lovers, Aang was able to see that the great towers and the palace were crumbled, the mail delivery systems non-existent. The mountain that the city was built on was carved strangely, which Aang realized was probably from earthbenders trying to defend their home. And even after the battle had been lost for years, the water was still winning. Waterfalls streamed down the mountainside surrounding the ruins. Ribbons of water even streamed through the city elaborately, falling down from one central point, the very tip of Omashu, the palace. For some reason, the city seemed to be pushed against the mountainside behind it, and the rivers were fed by water from the mountains. The water ended its journey down at the bottom of the ravine, which seemed to be a grand lake by itself. He assumed that an underground waterway led to the sea. Behind him, Azula and Sokka had stopped bickering, and the former stepped up beside him. You know, she said, if you really look at it, the ruins look sort of pretty. Aang's stony expression didn't change. It was, when it was still a city. But now it's been reduced to nothing, Sokka said condescendingly. The siege lasted for days, and the Water Nation won. They didn't even give the city a chance to surrender. Zuko walked up after them, getting his own view of the once grand city. He narrowed his eyes at Sokka. They killed them all, Sokka finished. You shut up, Sokka. Aang yelled. Aang pointed the tip of his sword at Sokka, who responded by gathering water and ice at the tips of his fingers from the rain. Azula did nothing as the droplets slid down her face and hair, but Zuko ran between them. Guys, stop! He shouted as the force of the rain increased. Let's just get to shelter. Oh, but I love the rain. Sokka shouted back, condensing the water into a solid bullet and shooting it at Aang, who dodged and sent back a burst of fire. It didn't go far before sizzling out, creating steam that hissed into the air. Trying to end the fight quickly, Zuko slid behind Sokka and held one of his broadswords to his neck. Don't do anything else. Zuko yelled to Aang, his hand quavering as he held the sword. Sokka noticed this and dropped down, sweeping his leg out behind him and tripping up Zuko. He froze there a second later. Sokka stood still for a moment to regard his two foes. Aang had sheathed his sword and drawn his staff, while Azula stood still, looking slightly amused by the situation but didn't seem as if she was going to do anything. Why did you want to take me with you, Avatar? Sokka called to Aang angrily, his one eye wide. With his mussed-up hair soaking wet, he looked like a crazy person. Why did my grandmother leave me so readily? He thrust his hand toward Aang, shooting a cutting blade of water from the ground. In response, the Avatar jumped over the attack and dropped his foot down in an axe kick, hitting Sokka with a torrent of wind that forced him to the ground. As Aang landed, he swung his staff horizontally, hitting the waterbender with a wide, windy arc. Globules of water rose up next to Aang and converged on him from both sides, one to his head and another to his legs, sending him spinning to the ground. Before his face smacked against the mud and rock, he stopped his fall with his hands and looked up at Sokka, who was standing. Sokka was about to attack him with more water, but without warning, Azula came up behind him and punched him in the back of the head. Before he could fall forward, she grabbed his left arm and twisted it almost to the point of breaking, before simply holding it behind him. Sokka fell unconscious. "That was dirty," Aang said to Azula as he stood up from the muddy ground. All of them were completely drenched. "I know," Azula said with a smirk. A crack of lightning lit up her features. "Let's unfreeze Zuzu from that ice before he drowns or something." Leaving Sokka on top of Appa, who was miserable in the rain, Aang and Azula thought Zuko with their burning hands. As the swordsman stood, he tried wiping the mud off of him and spoke. "We should try to find shelter." "The cave," Azula suggested. "No. They're probably filling up with water right about now," Aang said. He looked back to Omashu. "We should go there." Zuko seemed uncomfortable with the statement, but Azula shrugged. "Whatever. As long as we're out of the rain," she said. Another blast of lightning lit up the sky. Piandao stood in a meditative stance, standing straight and erect with his sword held behind him, keeping his posture correct. He kept his balance with the swaying of the ship in the slightly rough ocean, his eyes closed. He was at the front of the ship, facing his destination. The Earth Kingdom. But a storm was coming. He could feel it in his bones. More specifically, he was going to the storm. Behind him, Fat the butler approached. "We'll be arriving at the Earth Kingdom soon, sir," he said. "I advise you to come inside. It's going to start raining." As soon as he finished his words, water droplets began to fall on the two of them. "All right," said Piandao with a small sigh, walking to the inside of his own private boat. It was smaller than the ones of the water navy, but it served its purpose. "Are you sure you don't want some guards accompanying you as you travel?" Fat asked, showing some worry for the old master. "Yes, I'm sure. And for the last time, I don't need any protection. Not even a carriage. Traveling on foot will be sufficient," said Piandao. Extravagance was not important. He was perfectly fine with living and traveling like a regular Earth Kingdom peasant. He would be safer that way on his quest. He was hunting the Avatar. He wanted his meteorite sword back. The group managed to find a large, cavernous house that was high enough to stay dry and big enough to fit Appa. Flying over to the city, Aang and Azula tied up the unconscious Sokka again, but by the time they were finished, he was conscious again. Azula, Zuko, and Seibashi gathered around a fire lit in Aang's hand, since finding some dry wood was an impossible task. Sokka stubbornly sat outside of their ring. "As soon as the storm ends, we're out of here," Azula said. "I've never felt so miserable in my life." She was more than miserable, she was cranky. And a cranky Azula was not fun to be with. "You're telling me," said Aang. Storms brought back bad memories, both in his world and in this one. The rain was softer, but it was still a storm. At least the explosions of lightning wouldn't keep them awake anymore, though the wet and the cold did anyway. It was drafty and water seemed to seep in everywhere. "Someone should tell a story," said Zuko. After a pause, he said, "Anyone got any good ones?" "I do," said Sokka, his voice dripping with fake excitement. "One time, not too long ago, I was captured by a bunch of idiots who had no idea what they were doing. Then I was betrayed. And humiliated. But then, there was a bright, happy rainbow and we all happily lived happily ever happy after." The other three stared at him. "Relax, guys," said Sokka dismissively. "I was joking. There was no happy ending. I'm still captured." "I fail to see the humor in your statement," Azula said flatly. "What a shame," Sokka bit back. "You could use some humor in your life." Azula glared at him, then at her brother. "Way to go, Zuzu. Your story time idea was a bad one." "At least I'm trying to think of something," Zuko responded, glumly resting his chin on his knees. Sokka snorted. "I can't believe you answer to something as pathetic and unmanly as Zuzu from a girl." "Shut up, Cyclops," Azula shot at him. Before Sokka could try to attack them again and humiliate himself with his bound hands, Aang stopped them with a loud whistle. "Okay, guys. Enough. Angela and Sokka were effectively silenced. How come they never listen to me? Zuko groaned. Please Angela, stop fighting with him, Aang nearly begged. It's not worth it. I don't want to see you two hurting each other. Angela narrowed her eyes. Why do you care about him? She questioned. Why did you want him with us in the first place? Sokka grunted and stared at Aang. I'd like to know that, too. It has to do with that thing you can't tell us, we know that already, Zuko said, entering the argument. But what is it, and why can't you tell us? What are they talking about? Sokka asked, his voice rising aggressively. Why am I involved with whatever secrets you're hiding? Guys, it's nothing, really. Like that's not an obvious lie, Angela cut in. Don't you trust us, Aang? Just tell us already. Aang grasped his head with both hands and looked around at all of them, his eyes wide with slight panic, trying to get his thoughts in order. You've kept secrets for far too long. We've told you everything about ourselves, said Zuko. We're a family, aren't we? Aren't we? Monk Gyatso and the other airbenders may be gone, but you still have a family. Sokka and I, we're your family now. I don't know. Aang hurled the fire in his hands to the floor, causing it to shoot upward in a great pillar of his helplessness and anger. Angela, Zuko, and Sokka all jumped back, shielding their faces from the heat. Once the fire was consumed by the air, Angela calmly put her hand down and stared sadly at Aang. But why? After all this time, don't we mean anything to you? Aang was unable to meet her eyes, but his voice was hurt. Please. I didn't mean that. I'm just so confused. Just give me time, and then I'll tell you. Okay. Katara and I aren't going to let anything happen to you. Promise. Was that promise ever kept? Didn't they all go through lifetimes of pain? Aang was unable to deny it to himself any longer. He was attached to Angela, Zuko, Sokka, and the whole world they lived in. But somehow, it made him feel overwhelmingly guilty. He felt as if he were betraying Katara and Sokka of his world. Were this Zuko and this Angela part of his family now? Or did he just go and make a new family, leaving his old one behind? Were they being replaced? Angela crossed her arms stubbornly and looked away. Sokka found himself doing the same thing, but he stared right at Angela. Huffing, they both turned their heads again, away from each other. Zuko, in an attempt to defuse the situation, gave an uneasy smile and pointed outside. Look. It stopped raining. When no one said anything, he picked up his sword sheath. Aang, let's go train. I'm tired of sitting around. Giving out a long sigh, but realizing this was more than he could have asked for, Aang followed him outside. The ostrich horse maneuvered itself well through the mountain pass, avoiding rocky crags and quick pitfalls to death. A winding, old trail was still visible and usable, guiding the old woman on her way to the Omasha ruins. Even though she had a brown cowl wrapped around her face and a tan shawl covering her shoulders, in addition to thick Earth Kingdom clothes, the woman still felt the cold seeping to her bones. Traveling through high-altitude mountain passes made the cold even worse. The ostrich horse she was riding was a loyal steed, however, and it stayed with her despite the travel conditions. That didn't mean it wasn't susceptible to fear. Bandits were a common occurrence here, and she would have been stupid to come unprepared. 3 thieves emerged from the craggy rocks, brandishing swords and knives, grinning cruelly. The old woman set her blue eyes on them without fear, the only part of her face visible. Well, well, said one of the bandits, dropping into a clumsy knife stance, what do we have here? A defenseless old crone on an abandoned trail. The opportunity was too good to pass up. I'm not in the mood for lengthy conversations about the wrong paths you chose in life, the old woman said simply. So I'll just cut this short. In one quick movement, before the other two could even level their swords at her, the woman sprang from the ostrich horse with the agility of someone a fraction of her age. She rolled to a stop in front of the first thief, grabbed his wrist and diverted his panicked stab with her gloved hand, opening up his defense and palming him in the chest. He rolled down the mountain path, tumbling to a stop several feet below. Yelling in fear, he scrambled away. Taking a stance, she waited for one of the other bandits to charge at her, Which one of them did? She bent low beneath his stab, hit his wrist upward, grabbed his arm, and threw him right over her shoulder. He slammed against the ground in pain. He, too, got up and ran. The third bandit eyed her much more warily, fear in his wide, brown eyes. She was about to get back on her ostrich horse and calmly dismiss him, but an arrow suddenly shot from an unseen precipice, missing her by a fair distance but still liable to pose a threat. Her keen blue eyes shot up to the archer, who was now readying to shoot her again. Before he could, she moved into action. Her booted steps were light as she padded up the rocky wall, propelling herself forward with outcroppings of stone, which were already in place. Lithely moving up with every step, she was about to reach the archer when he had another quivering arrow drawn, pulled back and ready to shoot. She was still too far away, and unable to twist out of its path. The arrow shot from the bow. A glint of silver. Another man was there, chopping the arrow out of the air with his own sword, using incredible dexterity and balance to keep himself up on the rocks as well as move with his blade, cutting the bowman's weapon in half. The woman pivoted on the spot, taking long strides back to the ground to take down the last bandit, whom she feared another sneak attack from. Upon landing, however, she crouched in an attempt to lower the shock, but pain lanced up her old bones. Thankfully, the bandit was gone as she applied pressure to her legs. The swordsman met her only a moment later, calming the poor ostrich horse. "Don't call me an old crone ever again," the woman yelled, shaking her fist at the retreating bandits. She turned to her savior, smiling genially at the old, but still clearly younger than her, man. "Piandao, it's good to see you," Kun Na said pleasantly, pulling down her hood. "Lady Kun Na," he greeted, smiling back. "I didn't expect to see you here." He sheathed his white blade. He still had that same distinct voice she remembered. They walked along the path, the ostrich horse between them. "You're the same as ever, saving poor old women from run-ins with scum," she said, laughing throatily. He smiled wider. "It's what I do." After the greetings were over, he turned to more serious matters. "What brings you to these parts? The road to Omashu isn't the safest place to be these days." She put her hands on her hips. "How would you know, Fire Nation man?" He nodded his head. "That encounter with the bandits just told me enough." "Very true," she responded. "I'm here to find my grandson. He is with the Avatar in Omashu. The boy told me himself that they were coming here." "Then it seems that we have the same goal," said Piandao. "I am seeking the Avatar's young swordsman friend. I have never seen a student with greater potential. I spotted their bison in the air." After turning around a bend in the path, the expanse of the Omashu ruins opened up before them, but they were above it. The entrance to the city, and the palace, were directly beneath them. A steep, narrow path winded down to it. "Watch your step," Piandao warned the waterbender. This pathway was constructed by earthbender archaeologists a few years after the city fell. As he carefully walked down the path, he looked behind him, only to spot Kun Na sliding down the waterfall around the path on a water snake. She was cheering happily. He simply shook his head. Sometimes, old people seemed to act like children. Aang's single black sword met Zuko's dual silver ones in a fierce block, but Zuko swept his right sword around, which bounced off the tip of Aang's. Aang jumped backward and held his left hand away from the action as he used his right to deftly strike Zuko lightly, but repeatedly, in a faster style that he preferred. Zuko matched all of his stabs with parries and slashes. They continued this way for a long time. He knew it was dangerous to do, but Aang's chaotic mind couldn't keep itself from wandering during their small practice duel. Stone blocks and rubble littered the ground all around them. Houses were missing walls and roofs, some were just barely standing walls. What was left of the mail delivery system now only served as pathways for water to slide down. It was quiet except for the steady fall of water, occasional, random drops, and the steps of their feet as they splashed into puddles. A low mist hung over the entire ruin. There were no people anywhere in the city. He desperately wanted to know more about the siege of Omashu, but Sokka admitted to not knowing more than he already told them. Pieced together with what Aang already learned from Long Feng weeks ago, Bumi's fate was unknown. Aang didn't know if his old friend was dead, as he was in his own world, or still alive somewhere. According to Sokka, everyone was killed. Bumi was gone. Aang sighed, accepting the fact, even though his hopes of seeing his old friend again were shot down. The Avatar struck a little harder against his training partner. "Whoa, Aang. Calm down," Zuko warned, blocking Aang's sword with the flat of his blade. He pushed against the airbender, causing him to slide backward into a faded stone pillar. Disoriented for a moment, Aang paused, but stared at Zuko and swung his heavy blade down, readjusting his grip. "I'm just getting started," the Avatar replied, grinning. Zuko grinned back, sliding into a deeper stance. "Good," said another voice from above. Aang looked around, instantly on guard with his sword. He turned around just in time to bring up his sword to block a straight, silver blade. "You're ready for a longer fight, then?" "Master Piandao." Zuko gasped. "What are you doing here?" Aang narrowed his eyes slightly, straining against the sword master's strong hold. Aang's sword arm shook as he gripped his hilt with both hands. "I wasn't expecting you to follow me," he said. "You expect me to let you walk off with my most valued sword?" The old man responded. Zuko's eyes widened. "Aang, did you steal that?" he asked accusingly. "You told me you two made a new one." "Sorry, Zuko," Aang said to his friend, "I didn't want to lie to you." Piandao broke the hold, sliding his sword around to Aang's lower region, but the Avatar blocked it. The old master spun, striking with a harder swing which pushed Aang back. "I want that back," said the master. Zuko's hands shook, his knuckles turning white around his sword hilts. "Sorry. But I really can't," said Aang. The meteorite sword belonged to Sokka, he was adamant about that. Sokka needed that sword in order to save more lives, which it did countless times in the past. In this world, however, the sword would become a mark of their friendship. It would belong to Sokka, if all went as Aang planned. It wasn't just for the nostalgia. "Why not?" Zuko yelled, charging at his friend. Aang's eyes widened considerably as he sidestepped the blows, dodging nimbly between them. With the help of his airbending, he jumped back a safe distance, but Piandao was on him immediately after. "I really like this sword," Aang gave as an answer. "Zuko, get out of this fight," said Piandao. "You have no business in it." Zuko looked hurt, but did not sheath his swords. "But I want to help you. I won't have you turning on your friends." "It doesn't follow the code of honor," the old swordsman replied. "Neither does running, really, but I have no choice," Aang spoke up, using more of his airbending to circle around Piandao and Zuko and sprint up the stone ruins. Piandao quickly gave chase, but he fell behind in seconds. Aang ran back to the abandoned house as fast as he could, hoping Azula and Sokka didn't wreck the place in another one of their fights. He was quickly attempting to come up with an explanation for them and why Zuko suddenly seemed to turn against him. He couldn't exactly leave him behind, but something had to be done. When he got back to the house, Azula, Sokka, Appa, and Sabashi were all outside. Surprisingly, the firebender and the waterbender weren't trying to kill one another. "I'm bored, Aang," said Azula, yawning. "When can we leave?" Bothering Sokka sort of lost its appeal. The waterbender glared at her, his hands still tied, munching on seal jerky. "We're leaving in a couple of minutes," Aang responded. Surprisingly, Sokka even seemed happier about leaving the ruins. "Wait!" a voice called to them. Aang gripped his sword, fearing Piandao again, but Kunna emerged from around stone blocks. "I'm glad I made it in time," the old woman said, smiling. "Hello Kunna," Aang greeted, bowing quickly. Sokka stood up immediately, glaring daggers at his grandmother. He was only slightly surprised, but it was only because he forgot that they planned to meet here after Kunna finished gathering information from her sources. "Why did you leave me with them?" Sokka immediately shouted, foregoing a greeting. "Why didn't you bring me with you? You're a traitor." "Sokka, please. I found a place where we can both stay in safety," Kunna said to him. "The White Lotus is offering you shelter. We can both hide in peace from the Water Tribe and the Earth Kingdom." Aang raised an eyebrow quizzically. "The White Lotus? What was that? Sokka's eyes widened. You'll take me with you. His eyes immediately hardened. But you left me with them, he said, indicating Aang. You abandoned me? It was only temporary, Kun Na said softly. I love you, grandson. Please, come with me. I'm sorry. Her voice was sincere, and Sokka seemed to be trembling. Aang decided to step in. No. He's fine with us, he said. Kun Na, Sokka, and Azula all stared at him. Why? I found a place for him, Kun Na replied. Certainly you don't want him with you. You even have him tied up. Well, yeah, Azula said, speaking for the first time, every time we untie him he tries to attack us. So let me take him off your hands, Kun Na offered. I can't, Aang said, looking away from the old waterbender. I want Sokka to stay with us. You can't do this, Avatar, Kun Na said, her forehead wrinkling. Aang sighed, they were on first-name terms in the Golden City. Why won't you give him to me? I'm not some object to be bartered over. Sokka interjected. Gran, help me get the Avatar so I can bring him home to the Water Nation. We can't do that, Sokka, she said softly, shaking her head. We're on his side now. I never made that decision. Sokka yelled. I'm not a traitor. And that was exactly why Aang wanted to keep Sokka with him. Sokka needed to change. Aang knew his old friend was capable of it. Zuko was in his own world, wasn't he? Sokka had some good in him. He even began to show some of it in the short time he was their prisoner. Aang clenched his fist. He wasn't going to give up on Sokka. He was his best friend, his brother, and he wasn't going to abandon him. He felt that only he could change the Water Prince, and this time, it needed to happen faster, since Zuko joined their side too late. The war needed to be won this time. He needed Sokka's help earlier. Kun Na wouldn't be able to do it for him in time. But everything seemed to be going wrong. His grand plan was crumbling to pieces all around him, just like these ruins. There was a disturbance in the air. Aang, watch out! Azula called. The Avatar sped out of the way just in time for Piandeo's blade to sink into the ground where he was moments before. Azula, get on Appa, quickly! Aang shouted to her. Take Sokka! What? Kun Na exclaimed. What's going on? Piandeo pulled his sword out of the rock as Zuko came up behind him. Piandeo, what are you doing? The Avatar took my sword, the old man said. Now he's trying to take your grandson. Zuko stood beside his master, his dual blades drawn. Zuko, go with your friends. Now. But. Go. You belong with the Avatar and your sister, despite their actions. That's what loyalty is. You don't abandon your friends for anything, he said, glancing significantly at the younger warrior. Your loyalty is one of your more astounding traits. Don't let it go for anything. Zuko's mouth was hanging open slightly, but he nodded, running to the bison. Stupid firebender, let me go. Sokka yelled at Azula as she tried to restrain him. Get on, Appa, she said fiercely, straining against the strong boy. Sokka twisted out of her grasp despite his bound hands. He pushed both of them forward and bent water at her, which she sidestepped. Flames grew around her fists. Before Azula could do anything, Aang hit Sokka with a torrent of wind, sending him flying into Appa's furry hide. Sokka quickly recovered, readying himself as Azula thought of a way to get him onto the bison. A moment later, Zuko was at her side. She smirked. 2 against 1, there was no way Sokka could beat them now, especially with his hands tied. Piandeo attacked first, charging at Aang with his sword. Aang blocked each consecutive blow, each clash producing sparks. The flurry of blades was a blur to any onlookers, but the two clearly saw each other's faces. Both sets of eyes were set determinedly. Piandeo was pushing Aang back. Using the force of a single strike, Aang pushed himself off of Piandeo's blade and propelled himself backward, landing gently on a cushion of air. He was about to turn and run for it, but a jet of water slammed into him and knocked him to the ground. Kun Na had entered the fray. Aang was wise enough not to try and underestimate her. "Let Sokka come to me," she said. "Don't make him go with you forcefully." Aang stood and stared at her resolutely. "I'm sorry. But he has to stay with us," he answered. Several small water whips attempted to converge on him, but a barrier of air repelled the attacks. He retaliated with a swipe of his sword, releasing a powerful arc of fire that was blocked by a wall of ice. Before Kunna could return the attack, Piandao rushed him again, swinging his sword slowly but strongly. Aang dodged the attacks by a hair, using the agility bestowed on him by his airbending abilities. Ducking and sidestepping his attacks, Aang leapt backward again, though higher up this time. He turned and sped up the mountain of rubble. What kind of mess had he gotten himself into? His plans to help were spiraling out of control. Looking back on Aang's fight with the two masters, Azula rolled her eyes. "I'm doing the grunt work. How come Aang gets to have all the fun?" She flexed her fingers, letting Zuko deal with Sokka. The two boys were currently involved in a brawl of fisticuffs, but Zuko had the significant advantage since the latter's hands were tied. Sokka, unfortunately, was doing a good job blocking the attempts to knock him out. When Sokka's eye glinted, though, Zuko knew something wasn't going to end up well. "I can still waterbend with my feet, suckers!" Sokka yelled, and up until that point the two fire siblings didn't realize he was gathering water around his feet. Suddenly, he slid forward, barreling into Zuko and knocking him to the ground. Azula didn't get much more of a warning as the prince skated across the water, pushing her out of the way. With the two obstacles gone, Sokka slid across to the mountain of rubble that Aang was on, freezing the water beneath him and flying across the icy ramp. As he was in the air, the ramp melted back into water, and using his bound hands, Sokka managed to pull off a handstand against the rock, manipulating the water with his feet to create a larger-than-normal whip. Azula was dumbfounded. Aang didn't even notice, so focused on his fight with the two old masters. Azula narrowed her amber eyes. She wasn't going to be defeated that easy. She was going to protect Aang. She was a fire-bending master now, she had that kind of power. A jet of fire large enough to engulf the water prince erupted from her fingertips, and the waterbender was forced to cancel his attack to create a swirling shield to block it, all while still balanced on his bound hands. Azula pursed her lips. That was abnormal. Or Ty Lee. There really wasn't much of a difference. Aang did, in fact, notice Sokka out of the corner of his eye. He tried to lure Sokka into attacking him so he could surprise all three warriors against him, hitting them all at once with the same attack. He saw Azula stop the tribesman, but Sokka was still where he wanted him. "You have things we both want, Avatar," said Piandao. As an enemy, the man wasn't as kind as Aang remembered, and he missed that. He was beginning to hate the word Avatar as a name. "I'm not your enemy," Aang said calmly as the master shot at him again. At the same time, Kunna expelled another burst of water. Aang smirked. Sokka was still in the right place. The boy forced his fists together and the air circled around him rapidly, shooting off in all directions, simultaneously protecting him from any attack. Piandao and Sokka were thrown back, the latter right into Appa's saddle. Kunna's watery attack was dispelled. "You certainly act like one," Kunna said, her voice almost sad. Aang turned to yell at Azula amidst the fighting. "Azula! You and Zuko get on Appa now. Fly away." "All right." The girl nodded. She immediately executed her next objective, taking Appa's reins as Zuko hopped into the saddle, looking with remorse at his master while he held Sokka down. Kunna and Piandao could do nothing as the bison soared into the sky, a small lemur following behind him. Aang lowered his sword as Appa gained in altitude. "I'm sorry. You don't understand, but I have to do this. To both of you." Kunna frowned. "You disobeyed my wishes and betrayed my trust," she said to him coldly. Aang nodded his head. "I know." As he spoke, his wooden staff fell from the sky and nearly hit him in the head. He looked up, Azula threw it down to him. He directed his stare at the older people again. "I'm going now. I hope we see each other again." Piandao held his sword to Aang. "I'm not letting you go yet. You still have my blade." Aang's gaze was stony, but he unfurled his glider and flew away before the swordsman could attack him again. An additional burden was hanging on his shoulders, and it showed to all of them. Piandeo's shoulders fell. Sometimes, children seemed to act like old people. Aang landed on Appa's saddle as they continued soaring through the sky, leaving the ruins of Omashu behind them. As he folded his glider, Zuko stared disapprovingly at him. Sokka's glare was hateful. Aang refused to meet their eyes. "I didn't want to be the bad guy," Aang stated. "That wasn't my intention." "Why did you take his sword?" Zuko interrogated him. "Why did you lie to us?" Azula slid to the front of the saddle, sitting beside Aang. "Obviously, because of you," she said. "You're acting unreasonable." "I'm actually proud of Aang. He's growing a backbone," she said with a smirk. "This isn't a joke. And don't support him." Zuko yelled at her. "You're both being irresponsible. What in the world made you steal from a well-respected, noble master? You're not my mom or my dad, so don't pretend you know what you're talking about," Aang said venomously. Zuko shrank back. "You don't know my reasons and you can't tell me what to do. So tell me your reasons," Zuko said, his voice hard. He crossed his arms and stared down at Aang. Aang imagined a horrendous scar appearing over his left eye, and the thought made him sigh. "I don't want to talk about it," he replied, looking away from the swordsman. "Then I can't trust you anymore," Zuko said. Aang felt a weight drop into his stomach. "What about Sokka?" Azula asked, indicating the waterbender with a wave of her hand. "Same thing," Aang muttered, staring guiltily back at the ruins. Nothing was going as he planned. He assumed Kunna was going to show up with information about the war in the Earth Kingdom, not about Sokka. He didn't know she wanted him back. "She still cares," Sokka said to nobody in particular. "Ah, how sweet," Azula cooed. "Not. I didn't mean to say that out loud." Sokka muttered, slumping in his seat. "We'll follow after him together," said Piandao to Kunna, as the two navigated through the ruins. "Just don't fall behind," she told him, offering a fake smile. They were now both on the hunt for the Avatar, each with a bone to pick. Aang didn't mean to pick up two new enemies. He didn't mean for Sokka to hate him vehemently. He didn't mean for Zuko to distrust him. For the first time since coming to this new world, even after discovering his friends were his enemies and his enemies were his friends, even after learning the fate of multiple worlds were on his shoulders, Aang felt at his worst. He hoped that everything would get better when he found Toph, and when he revealed the truth to all of his friends. Would Azula, at least, still trust him? Would they forgive him for manipulating them? Would they be angry? He wanted to tell them everything. But he didn't know how, and if he could. Chapter 4, The Trials. It was just a few days after their failed mission at Ba Sing Se, and the group, now reduced to 6, took refuge far away from the city, hidden deep within a forest to regain their strength and will. Aang was separated from the rest of his friends, thinking and brooding to himself as he traversed the worn path. He heard the steady roar of a waterfall nearby. Aang, Sokka, and Katara had been here before, back when they were first traveling together. Now, waterfalls made good camping spots, they covered any sort of noise made. But their actual campsite was far away from the falls, deep within the forest. They knew how to disappear well. Zuko and Katara had wandered off together a little earlier. As the unofficial dad and mom of the group, they often made decisions regarding the next destination, discussion over the latest things that had happened, keeping each other updated on the current physical, mental, and emotional states of the kids. They kept everyone going by providing support and encouragement when they could. Who knew Zuko had paternal instincts? Just because Zuko and Katara were the parents, it didn't mean there was any romantic attachment between them. There'd be hell to pay if Zuko laid as much as a finger on Katara. Rather than searching aimlessly for the two, Aang allowed his seismic sense to extend in every direction, hoping to find their exact positions. Once the vibrations came back to him, he nodded. His assumption that they'd be at the waterfall was correct. Zuko and Katara were sitting together on a rather large boulder, their shoulders slumped, faces downcast. After their ordeal in prison, and torture, they were thinner, paler, and more haggard than ever. Aang guessed that they were conversing about the recent happenings in Ba Sing Se, the loss of Haru, trying to find the resolve to persist before they preached about never giving up to everyone else. He wanted to be with the two, trying to plan what to do next. Never give up, not without a fight. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't die. The moment Aang stepped into the glade, Zuko pressed his lips against Katara's. They didn't even notice the younger boy's presence. Shock, what is he doing? Rage, I'm going to kill him. Confusion, how did this happen? Sadness, why isn't she pulling away? And helplessness, why can't I move? All overwhelmed him at once, seeing them locked together for eternity, unable to yell, unable to stop them. He felt everything, and yet, he felt nothing at all. Suddenly, Katara's half-lidded eyes opened wildly, realizing a little belatedly what was happening. She pulled fiercely away from Zuko, glaring at him. What did you do that for? She demanded of him heatedly. It was then that she noticed Aang and his expression, and a shaken hand flew to her mouth. Oh. It took Zuko a little longer to notice Aang, but he was still frozen from the rejection. He seemed at a loss as to what he did. Then he followed Katara's gaze, locking eyes with Aang. Aang felt that if the Avatar state worked, it would have activated now. But it wasn't the time to run away. Zuko touched his Katara, and now he was going to be rewarded with a very angry Avatar. What did you do that for? Aang snarled, repeating Katara's question. Katara moved from the boulder, away from Zuko, but not exactly near Aang, either. You can't touch her. She's mine. Katara, previously glaring at Zuko, rounded on Aang with an equal amount of anger in her eyes. Excuse me? What did you just say? Whatever made you think that you could touch her? Aang raged, completely ignoring the waterbender. I don't need permission from anybody, Zuko responded, narrowing his eyes at Aang. The boy let out another snarl, nearly throwing himself at Zuko, forgetting bending, forgetting his staff, forgetting any sense or reason, thinking only with his fists. Overwhelming amounts of tension and grief stockpiled and collapsed, spilling over everything. Aang was interrupted from his attack by the sound of moving rocks, and suddenly, Toph appeared in the clearing, pulling along Sokka and Suki after her. What the hell's going on here, Twinkle Toes? Your vibrations are dancing like nuts. They're about to kill each other over a stupid kiss. Katara said, not taking her eyes off the two of them. Guys, wait. Stop fighting. We've lost too much to fight over something stupid like that. We can't fall apart now. Sokka shouted. Suki worriedly shifted her eyes between the two of them. Toph, we should go. She edged quietly, gripping the earthbender by the collar of her shirt. No, I wanna see this. Just because you love her, Aang, doesn't mean nobody else can. Zuko continued his note, ignoring their audience. Katara's blue eyes widened, once luminous and innocent, but now hurt, angry, and even a little cold. Everyone knew Aang loved her, but this was the first time it was ever said out in the open. Aang narrowed his eyes dangerously. What did you just say? Oh. Suki weakly groaned. I love her, and there's nothing you can do about it, the firebender said resolutely. You're wrong, said Aang. You don't love her. You just think you do. Zuko clenched his fists, closing his eyes in an attempt to contain his rage. What makes you say that? You're just a kid. What do you know about love? The loss of Mai is fresh in your mind. You're lost and angry and confused, and Katara is the only one you can turn to. You're just doing this because Mai is dead. Zuko's eyes flicked open, glaring dangerously. This was Aang's only warning to an attack. Fire pumped from the ex-prince's fists, large and all-consuming. Aang flipped backwards, retaliating with a fissure opening up beneath Zuko's feet. The firebender leapt out of the way, but before he could attack again, a flood of water erupted between them, smacking both of the benders in their chests and throwing them away from the other. Katara created an ice wall to separate them further. That's enough. You're both being immature and stupid. Aang and Zuko glowered fiercely at each other through the crystal-clear ice, as if seeing the other truly for the first time. Zuko, I'm sorry, but I don't take well to being kissed out of the blue, she said to the firebender on her right. Aang smirked triumphantly, but she rounded on him immediately. That doesn't mean that you can, either. To both of them, she closed her eyes and tried to calm herself, speaking through grit teeth. No one in this group will attack anyone else. We've done too much to fall apart now. Things are getting more difficult than ever, but we won't fall. We can't. The whole world depends on just us now. Zuko, you started the attack, and even though Aang's comment was completely uncalled for, you should have showed restraint. During that, she glared at Aang. And I'm not owned by anyone. With that, the angry waterbender stalked off, not looking at either of them again. The relationship between Aang and Zuko was never the same again. Aang sighed despondently, staring up at the sky that was in the early hours of the morning. He opted not to leave his bedroll since everyone else was asleep and would not wake for at least an hour. The two remained friends, and Zuko never advanced on Katara again, but after that day, everything was strained. Many things were said that both later regretted, but they were in the past and could not be changed. He hoped to view things as a second chance with this world's Zuko, but after his last stunt in the ruins of Omashu, things didn't seem to be any better. Zuko still didn't trust him. Zuko was still madder at him than ever. Sokka was, too, but he was always like that. Just when Aang thought he was making progress with the waterbender. For now, the only company he had was that of Azula, Seibashi, and Appa. There was a horrible irony in the fact that Azula was the only one to trust him. The firebender was lounging against Appa's leg, twirling a minuscule ball of flame between her fingers like that of a gambler and his coin. That blank face makes you look like a complete idiot, she said, drawing him out of his reverie. Thanks, Azula, he responded deadpan. So where are we going next? She drawled, bored. Omashu wasn't that big of a hit. Jailing, said Aang. I've heard that there are lots of good earthbenders there. Like Toph, he added inwardly. Hello? Earth to Aang, said Azula, sitting up and snapping her fingers in his face. Stop staring off into space. It makes you seem creepy. You're so full of compliments today. She smiled. I know. It's part of my irresistible charm. She tried getting a reaction out of him, but there was none. She frowned. So what are you thinking about, anyway? Some old friends, he replied mysteriously. Her frown deepened. What friends? Tell me about them. It was almost a demand, but she settled down to listen. Aang sighed. It was actually just about Zuko and Sokka, he replied. Ugh, you're still brooding over that? You're such a baby, she said, rolling her eyes. Just ignore them, and Zuzu will come crawling back to you. He's a big wimp. Yeah, I guess, but Sokka. Her amber eyes shot into his direction. Why do you care about what Sokka thinks of you? She asked quickly, as if trying to catch him off guard and scare the answer out of him. She clenched the wisp of flame into her fist. He's with us now. Unwillingly, Azula cut in. Yes, but... And he hates it, she interrupted again. But he will be on our side in time, Aang said clearly, enunciating every word. I promise you that. Again, I'm going to ask why. Maybe. He can teach me waterbending someday. You really think he can redeem himself? She asked, peering at him curiously. I know he can. He has it in him. We did make some progress, he confirmed aloud. Azula sighed. Don't you read any fiction, Aang? Never had the time, he responded, resting his hands behind his head. Why? Well, you should know that in most stories, whenever some idiotic villain tries sappily redeeming themselves, they die. And they usually die good. An image of Jet flashed into Aang's head. That's not going to happen to Sokka, Aang said resolutely. I say we stay low, go between the mountains instead of over them, Sokka argued. Why? It's quicker and more efficient to go right over them, Azula retorted. We can put mountains beneath us. We've done it before. We'll be seen if we go over. I thought you wanted to be found, said Azula, crossing her arms. Not by Earth Kingdom troops, he responded, glaring. We won't be seen if we go through the valleys. No, It creates a wind tunnel down there, Azula said. It's equally as windy if we go above the mountain, Aang threw in. Azula glared. We're about to pass by the tallest mountain in the world. If we go over it, we'll be so high. On top of the world. Azula said triumphantly. Aang glanced at Zuko, who was sitting at the saddle and preferred to stay out of the argument. What do you think, Zuko? You've got control of the reins. Since when do you value my opinion enough? You usually do your own thing, he answered coldly. Apple let out a low moan as the bison soared higher into the sky. What's Zuzu's problem? Azula asked, frowning. Aang sighed. It's not a good feeling to be betrayed, said Sokka, crossing his arms and avoiding their glances. I would know. Well, then. Why don't you both have a pity party together? Azula asked with mock sweetness. I'm over it now. Sokka shot back. He glared hatefully at Aang, causing the smaller boy to wince. Aang ran his fingers along his sword sheath. It will all be worth it soon. His gaze ran over his headband, discarded for a moment, his eyes being drawn to the White Lotus symbol. In Omashu, Kunna mentioned something about a White Lotus bringing her and Sokka shelter. What was that? Something figurative? Was she speaking in riddles and proverbs? The Avatar was brought out of his musings as he felt the sudden shift in elevation as Appa ascended even higher into the sky. Now, they were so high that the air was much thinner, and Aang knew that for any non-airbenders, it might be getting difficult to breathe. The tallest mountain in the world was right in front of them, but the peaks were so high up that the clouds obscured them, wrapping around the mountain tops and shielding them from view. As the bison neared the clouds, Aang stood on the saddle, calmly inhaling and exhaling, slowly beginning to rotate into a spinning motion. As he turned full circle, he sped up and released the wind he had been gathering in his hands, which sped up into the clouds and cleared a tunnel through the cold vapor, bathing them in a shaft of sunlight in a view of clear, blue sky. It appeared that Zuko had made his decision, fly over the mountain. As Aang peered through the tunnel he had created, his eyes narrowed. Why did the sun seem so bright and so close? He tried staring at the glowing ball of molten gold, but it burned his eyes. What was going on? Did they go so high that they left the very planet itself? How high was this mountain? And then they soared through the clouds, revealing the majesty of the mountain's full size to their eyes. For a moment, Aang thought that the sun rested on its peak. Then, as they neared, he realized it was a monolithic golden temple of the likes they had never seen. The sheer size and width of the mountain was dwarfed by this ancient civilization they had discovered and the pure, holy temples they had created. Azula yawned. Oh, look at that. A pit stop. I didn't know any people lived up here. Aang exclaimed, relishing in a bit of his old, childish enthusiasm from discovering something new. In all of my travels, I've never heard of a place like this. A wellspring of emotion erupted within him. Who could live in a temple on a mountaintop besides the air nomads, especially one so high and much more secluded than the cardinal air temples? Surprisingly, Sokka was the first to voice his thoughts, glancing at Aang with his single eye. Do you think there could be air nomads? Azula scoffed. Are you kidding me? She said to Sokka. Look at the tops of the temple. It's all a gold alloy, if you didn't notice. I didn't know you were blind in that one eye. Obviously, firebenders live here. Why, though? Zuko asked. They have no reason to live up here in seclusion, when they could be just as safe in the Golden City, he said, speaking for the first time on the subject. The Fire Nation isn't the only one to use gold, you know. Let's just get there and see, said Aang. Nobody said anything else. As the bison neared ever closer, they were able to observe that the walls of the temple seemed pure white, almost like it was its own fantasy world among the sea of clouds. Almost immediately, Aang's pessimism returned when he couldn't spot a single sky bison or people on gliders. Azula, the one with the best eyesight, spoke up. Look. Murals of firebenders. I was right, you were wrong, haha. She taunted them all. Hold on, said Sokka. Slow down the bison. These people might not take too well to intruders. There are catapults on the temple walls. If there are people still living here anymore, said Zuko, but he pulled on the reins slightly. Sokka shot up, pointing with both his fists, as his wrists were still tied together. "They're loading a catapult." "Ugh," said Azula, not at all fazed. "Why did you have to be right?" Aang sprang into action as a ball of rock and fire was launched into the air, hefting his glider and swinging it at the projectile with all his strength, diverting its path to the side. Just like the good old days. A trail of pitch-black smoke lingered in its wake, opening another hole into the sea of white clouds. Another projectile immediately followed, but Aang was forced to open his glider and swoop below it, trusting his friends to dodge it. Behind him, Zuko pulled Appa into a fierce dive. "Still determined to get there?" Azula asked Aang casually, her arms crossed, as Appa flew alongside the airbender. "Yeah, I wanna see what their problem is," Aang said, readying to dodge any other missiles they were planning to launch. As they neared the mountainside, firebenders lined the walls and launched combined orbs of orange fire. Aang soared above them, set on getting to the walls and trying to stop further conflicts, leaving the missiles to Azula. The master firebender stood at Appa's head, tucked her arms in, and pulled out a wide arc of burning red which sliced through each of the fireballs. Aang tried landing among the firebenders, sun warriors, he realized, but streams of flame interrupted each of his attempts. So instead of trying to fly in between them, he confronted the militaristic firebenders head-on. Grinning to himself, he flipped his glider around and stood on the top of it, literally surfing through the air as he saw Gyatso do in his younger days. Following this, he unleashed a rippling wall of fire with both hands that almost completely blocked the views and attacks of each of the other firebenders, revealing himself as the Avatar and simultaneously halting all of their strikes. Now within their ranks, Aang stepped among the temple hall, open to the sky beyond. He neatly shut his glider and waited for the Sun Warriors' shocked silence to end so they could greet him and apologize. Once his wall of fire burned away, their shock seemed to go with it. Instead of a greeting, however, he nearly received a fist of flame to the face. Aang smirked. He was an expert at fighting firebenders. Aang ducked underneath the attack and used his palms to swat away the ensuing attacks from the other benders. He was forced to drop by a particularly large wave, but he stopped his fall with his hand and kicked out a counter-attack with his foot. "Stop!" At these words, the Sun Warriors immediately halted their attack and stood stiffly, but remained wary. The speaker came into Aang's view, panting and breathless. "This is the Avatar," said the man, whom Aang recognized as the Sun Warrior chief that he met with Zuko, once upon a time. Aang held his stance, not knowing what to expect. "Why did you attack me and my friends?" he asked. Appa came to float alongside the walkway, Zuko with his swords drawn and Azula standing at ease, as if she orchestrated this herself and knew what was going to happen. Sokka seemed the most tense, as he was defenseless with his bound hands. "Why have you come here?" asked the chief, as another man stepped up next to him, their gazes harsh. "We have a natural curiosity," Sokka answered nonchalantly, hopping off of Appa's back. He seemed as if he didn't recognize a threat anymore, but Aang knew Sokka well, Prince Sokka included. He seemed calm and collected on the outside, but his lean muscles were tense and ready to spring into action at any moment. "Just passing through, you know." Cleverly, Sokka was trying to put the enemy's guard down by pretending to seem idiotically harmless. "Why did you attack us?" Aang questioned again. "The Sun Warriors have protected their secrets for several thousand years, and after learning what happened to the air nomads, we have kept any and all intruders out. The same fate will not befall this Temple of the Sun," said the chief, muscular arms crossed as he stood regally. At his words, Azula stepped down from the bison saddle. "Sun Warrior secrets?" she asked interestedly. Zuko, still seated at Appa's head, rolled his eyes at his sister. "Our ancient fire-bending techniques," said the man at the chief's side. Azula's eyes glinted. "Be quiet, Hamgeo," said the chief. "Yes," Hamgeo continued, his voice taking on the same tone Azula's usually did, "one would have to complete a trial to practice them." "Oh?" asked Azula. "Hamgeo, be silent," the chief demanded, his ornate head-dress bristling. "When someone chooses to begin a trial, they cannot leave until they are completed." "All the better to properly learn the techniques," said Azula. I'm in. Aang, Zuko, and Sokka all groaned. Avatar Kuruk's temple stood at the top of one of the southern islands, surrounded by snowstorms and fierce winds, one of the last truly sacred areas of the water tribes. Not only was the temple protected by the terrain, it was also protected by a sisterhood of priestesses, one that Avatar Aang had fought before. Princess Katara and Suki walked on the mountain path leading up to the temple. Katara was donned in her thick water tribe parka and her hood, while Suki wore her regular heavy armor. Katara was able to prevent the two from getting wet, though the wind continued to bite them. She was eager to get to the temple and retrieve what she wanted and depart on her journey for the Avatar as soon as possible. Suki was silent, but mostly so she wouldn't stir her princess ire. She weathered the storm with all her usual toughness. Despite her eagerness to leave, the princess particularly liked Avatar Kuruk's temple. It was one of the few places in the Water Nation where women were free from many ancient taboos. Water sages, all old women, were here to protect the temple because most of the men were off at war. As a child, Katara once wanted to come and train here before getting secret training from her grandmother. Aside from Katara, Kunna, and the sages, only 3 other women in all of the Water Nation were fighters, and Suki was one of them. Hama was another. The pair finally finished trudging up the slippery mountain path where they came upon the temple, a glittering ice and stone structure that was predominantly blue with icy steps leading up to it. A door of solid ice barred their way, but with a wave of her hand, Katara melted an opening and stepped in, followed quickly by Suki. The Kyoshi warrior flexed her fingers and shook out her auburn hair, announcing their presence. "Geez, that's quite a storm outside. Princess Katara." "Lady Suki," said an old water sage, hobbling up to them. "What an unexpected visit." "Sorry, Agaka. I can't stay long," said Katara, unfolding her arms. "I'm here to see my friend." The woman nodded. "Very well. I will retrieve her." "There's no need," said a soft voice from behind the woman. Katara looked around Agaka, and her face turned into a smile. "Hello, Princess," she said, prostrating herself on the floor. "There's no need to be that respectful. We're old friends, remember?" said Katara, walking to stand above her friend. The priestess on the floor looked up and smiled, standing and hugging her. "It's good to see you." "Yeah," the girl agreed. "You." Suki grinned, hugging her. Yu hugged her back, giggling. Scarcely older than Katara, Yu's luminous blue eyes shone with a gentle kindness that was only outshone by her snow-white hair. Her only imperfection was a streak of black at the front of her head, slanting down the side of her face. She stood with the regality of a princess, for that was what she was. The moment she turned 16, she left her home at the North Pole, where her father led, to come and train at the temple, where she could learn to fight and avoid marrying someone against her will. Though they were both princesses, Katara far outranked Yu, since the ruling family of the South Pole had all of the Water Nation under their control. Chief Arnook of the North Pole answered to Emperor Hakata, Katara's father. "All right, girls," Katara said to her friends, "I'm going to need your help. We're going after the Avatar, who has my brother captive. That boy will rue the day he kidnapped my brother. So that means we'll get to see Sokka again, right?" Suki asked, smiling coyly. "Yeah. Sokka," Yu said dreamily. A cold wind swept in front of 4 adjacent tunnels carved into the side of the mountain, each heavily decorated in Sun Warrior murals. Tall arches framed the man-made tunnels, indicating the importance of them. Aang, Azula, Zuko, and Sokka each stood in front of one. "How come I have to go through one of the trials?" Sokka complained. "I'm not even a firebender." Zuko crossed his arms. "I'm not, either," he said, glancing at Aang, as if it was his fault he was forced to do this. "And if the secrets are so closely guarded, why are you letting us go through the trials so easily?" "Silence," said the Sun Warrior chief, behind them all. Hamgeo, as always, was at his side, smirking as he rubbed his chin. More warriors were behind the two. "Our firebending secrets aren't the only reward for taking the trials." He glanced at Zuko. "And our trials aren't exactly easy, either. There is a reason why they're called trials. Few have succeeded without losing their minds." Apparently, Sokka and Zuko still had more complaints. Why are we being forced to take this? The chief glared. Once someone intrudes in our temple and requests a trial, they can never leave until the trials are completed. Because of her, he pointed at Azula, who rolled her eyes and yawned, you are forbidden from leaving. A request to take the trials cannot be refused. Aang, like Azula, had no complaints, but he wasn't about to go in unprepared. What's in there? What can we expect? You will have to navigate a maze, said Hamgeo. It is not only a physical journey, but a spiritual one, too, added the chief. Can we go yet? I want to be a better firebender, said Azula impatiently. Very well. Two warriors stepped up at Zuko and Sokka's sides, giving them torches. One of them also burned away Sokka's bonds, freeing his hands. He grinned and flexed his wrists. 4 women stepped up behind each of the children, offering a plain, undecorated cup of clear liquid. Drink that, said the chief. For it may be your last. I can't bend it, said Sokka, waving his hands futilely. What's going on? Aang, Azula, and Zuko drank. It burned going down their throats. Aang stared into the bottom of the empty cup. That wasn't water. Drink it, said Hamgeo to Sokka. When he saw that the other 3 were still standing after drinking the unknown liquid, he gulped it all down, blanching. Now go. You have Agni's blessing, said the chief, as drum beats began behind him. Zuko lit his torch, the first to enter. Zuko's feet beat softly against the solid stone, his eyes peering at his surroundings to the edge of the firelight. Inside the tunnel, nothing was decorated. It was plain stone going in a straight line, as far as he could see. When would the paths branch, and the maze begin? When he came upon the first junction several minutes later, he found his eyes fixing on the torch's flame. It seemed to be getting darker around him, though the flame got brighter and brighter. His vision was blurring. His eyes glazed over. The fire grew and grew, leaving the waxy torch, and floated to the center of the junction, where the fire spread and dissipated. The form of a man appeared. Zuko blacked out as a scarlet boot stepped into his line of vision. Aang jogged down the dark passageway, a bright, orange flame lit in the palm of his hand. The darkness seemed to stretch on for miles and miles with no end. He was eager to leave the maze, learn the fire-bending secrets, lightning, perhaps, and go on his way to find Toph and Jailing. Azula had to open her mouth and demand to take the trials, but this was an acceptable side trip. Anything to make them stronger. Anything to defeat the Water Emperor. Anything to get back home to Katara. Aang suddenly stopped, tilting his head. Was that just a trick of the light, or did he just see the hem of a blue dress ahead of him? Was it because he was just thinking of her? He felt a buzzing in the back of his mind, making him feel disoriented. Shaking it off, he ran towards the figure. He was startled when he came to a 4-way crossing. Where did she go? There. Afoot, turning down the right passage, accompanied by a flash of blue and white. A tinkling laugh followed after the figure. Aang's heart raced, his eyes widening, recognizing the noise. It's Katara. It has to be. Azula's quick feet pattered down the stone passage, burning red flames cupped in both of her hands. She strode with purpose, her amber eyes set, eager to gain more power. It would be hers. She would surpass even Zhang Zhang, her master. A sudden weariness seemed to be trying to overcome her, but she pushed herself forward, reasoning that it was probably the effects of that strange drink. Why didn't she just pretend to drink it, or at least some of it? She didn't want it interfering with her task. She suddenly felt very hot, which was beginning to unnerve her. Firebenders never felt uncomfortably hot. Not like this. She feared becoming sick. And then she stepped into a 2-way fork in the path. She paused only for a moment, ready to spring down a path at random. And then the dual flames in her palms turned an electric blue. Startled, she tried to quench them, but they seemed to leave her control, casting a blue light around the area, leaping into the air, spinning around her. Azula immediately suspected spiritual interference. What had she stepped into? She lowered into a fighting stance as the bluebell flames became too quick to follow with her eyes, molding together as one fierce ring that circled her endlessly. She revolved constantly, waiting for an unseen enemy to jump out at her from any side. Sweat gathered on her brow. The ring expanded, leaping to twin sconces on the walls, where the blue flames became strangely still and calm. They elicited a cold glow throughout the small chamber, haunting her, gripping her, injecting ice into her veins. Zhang Jiang's words of blue flames signifying killing intent jolted into her head. She could feel it, all around her, a malevolent presence was with her. "Oh, did I scare you?" Angela spun around. "This is stupid," Sokka muttered to himself. "Stupid firebenders and their stupid rituals. Jerks." He was glad to have his hands free, though. For the past few days, the rope had been rubbing them raw, and now he took the opportunity to fully flex them. It felt so nice to have his hands unbound, itching to make something, itching to waterbend. However, the tunnel quenched all thoughts of freedom. Maybe, once they got out of this, he'd act a lot better around the Avatar's group so they'd leave his hands free. At some point along the path, he fell unconscious. And Sokka dreamt. "Wait." Aang called after the figure, running after her, his hand outstretched. He saw her sliding around another curve in the tunnel, laughing merrily, teasing the boy to follow. "I want to see you." They kept twisting and turning down many different pathways that seemed to branch off into eternity. How deep was this mountain? Would he ever get out? Her voice sounded distant, far off, but she kept laughing, telling him that she was still there. She was with him. She always would be. Katara. His own voice echoed down the long, empty tunnels, accompanied by the sound of his own feet running, but curiously, not hers. He saw her long, brown braid smacking against her back, the loops of her hair flapping as she moved. But her back was to him constantly. He wanted to see her face. He had no doubt about who she was. She would lead him out of here. She was his guide. He had an unshaken faith in her purity and goodness. And then Katara escaped the edge of his firelight. He willed the flame brighter, not wanting to lose sight of her, and suddenly found himself in a wide chamber. And he wasn't alone. They were there. They were all there. Katara was at the forefront, hovering just a few feet out of his reach, her hands clasped behind her back, smiling down at him endearingly, looking just as he remembered her best. Sokka was right next to her, arm hanging on his sister's shoulders, sporting a grin with both eyes perfectly intact. Toph appeared on Katara's other side, wearing a genuine smile, and even though she couldn't see, he knew she was looking at him. Momo draped himself on Toph's head, and Appa, scarred but happy, rested behind them. And behind them, all around, floating many feet above him, all wearing smiles just for Aang, was everyone else. Heikuta was there, his smile reaching his tired eyes that Aang hadn't seen in ages, Bumi, next to Iroh, both of them grinning, Suki, the nearest, a hand on her hip, her smile one of approval, Haru, next to Suki, the Mechanist, Teo, even Pakku, and Zhang Zhang. They were all here. Aang's face split into the happiest smile he had ever bore. He felt so joyous, so free of burdens, so relieved to see them all again. Tears fell from his stormy eyes, now clearing to the lighter color they used to be. And best of all, they had all of their color. They weren't spirits, yet they weren't physically with him. But that was more than he could have asked for. He didn't feel alone anymore as he fell to his knees and wept. Later, he realized that the only person missing was Zuko. Zuko gripped his head, groaning and shaking away the thick fog that appeared over his vision. His first feeling was the cold stone beneath him, but there was also gentle warmth permeating through the small chamber. He rubbed his eyes and stood. Only to fall back down again in shock, because he saw himself standing in the center of the chamber. "You're awake," said the other him. Zuko was gaping, unable to move his mouth to utter the right words. "Don't be afraid. You're safe for the moment." As he spoke, Zuko got a good look at the man in front of him, easily picking out several strange differences between the older man and himself. Most obvious was a terrible scar over his left eye, a burn suffered years before. The burn Zuko seemed older, and from what he could tell of his eyes, they were also scarred, but on the inside. This Zuko had seen much and experienced more. His face was gaunt, almost sunken, his skin a sickly pale. His jet black hair was unruly and long, but his red clothes, tattered and worn, clung tightly to a muscular frame. "What are you, my brother?" Zuko asked the older man with strange similarities. "Not quite," said the burned Zuko. "Think of me as a spirit guide of sorts." "Why do you look so much like me, but also so much different?" asked the younger Zuko. "What are you?" "I'm, sort of a part of you, like you're sort of a part of me," said the scarred man. He groaned, running his fingers through his hair. "I don't know, it's hard to explain." "Well, you said you're here to guide me, so shoot," said Zuko, spreading out his arms. "I'm lost." "Well, what do you need?" the spirit guide asked awkwardly. They both ran their fingers through their hair, at a loss, not realizing that they shared the same nervous habit. "You can start by telling me how you were brought partially into the spirit world." "What?" asked the unscarred Zuko. "How can I be partially in the spirit world?" "Well, you're still in the same place, but you can see me. I'm not really a spirit, but it sort of works the same way. I think. You're just as lost as I am, aren't you?" Zuko deadpanned. The older man hung his head. "Well, I think the Sun Warriors gave us some sort of drug. I remember feeling sort of dizzy before I passed out. And that was you that came out of my torch fire, wasn't it?" "Yeah," scarred Zuko confirmed. "Ugh. Then this is Azula and Aang's fault," Zuko muttered. "Those two are bad influences on each other. All they care about is learning how to firebend, when there are so many more important things they should be doing. Let's hope Azula isn't too much of a bad influence on Aang," the gaunt man mumbled into his hand. "What?" "Nothing," said the worn spirit. "But you can't really blame them. All benders want to master their art. But they're sort of obsessive about it. We've been fighting so much lately, about their firebending and everything else. I don't trust Aang anymore, and I think that my sister is going down the same path." "You don't want your sister as an enemy." "Trust me," scarred Zuko said clearly, his face hard. And then his features softened, along with the glow of the fire. "But Aang. You should trust him. I'm sure he's doing everything in your best interests. He wants to help. He's trying so hard, you would never understand." "And you would?" "Yes," said the older Zuko, his eyes unchallenging. "I know Aang. And despite our differences, I consider him my best friend. You should too." Zuko peered at his other self. "What are you talking about? How could you be friends with him? You're a spirit." "How many times do I have to tell you?" asked the other Zuko, losing his patience. "I'm no spirit." Zuko sighed. "It's probably just some avatar thing." "Fine. Leave it at that. You know, I never thought I'd be arguing with my spirit guide. You must be pretty bad at the job." "Shut up. Just think about what I said." The scarred man took a step away from his counterpart, and held out his palm toward him. "Aang's going to need all the help he can get. He needs you. And, to help him, I'm going to give you a gift." "A gift? A gift," the scarred man repeated. "Use it well." And, to Zuko's great shock, the scarred man sprouted twin balls of fire that circled around his palm, meeting in the center. They propelled from his palm, striking Zuko in the chest, knocking him to the ground with great force. He knew no more. The voice sent chills of fear down her spine. She didn't know why, but the presence frightened her. Partially because it felt so familiar. But when she turned, she saw someone she didn't expect at all. Her mother. The voice she heard did not belong to Ursa, who seemed small and sad, wearing dark red, heavy robes, something Azula had never seen before. "Mom?" Azula asked, forgetting the eviler presence for a moment. "Azula. You always had such beautiful hair," said Ursa. Even her voice sounded mournful. "You always used to like it, didn't you?" Azula asked, allowing a smile to show itself on her face. She knew it couldn't be real. Her mother was just a vision. And she accepted that for now. "What are you doing here?" "I didn't want to miss my own daughter's coronation," Ursa cooed softly. "What?" Azula asked, perplexed. What are you talking about? I know you're not a monster, Ursa said sadly. I think you're confused. All your life you used fear to control people. Like your friends Mai and Tai Li. What do they have to do with this? How do you know them? You're just scared. But I love you, Angela. I do. Angela bit her lip, angry. She had had enough of this hallucination, brought on by consumption of those drugs. Summoning flames in her hands, she banished the image of her mother. And then, the cold returned. What's wrong? You don't love your own mother. Angela regarded the figure in front of her, feeling as if she was staring into some twisted perversion of herself. The girl, no, woman, in front of her had the same hair, the same body, the same face, but her amber eyes contained something else. Something malevolent. Something unnatural. She held the same smirk, but like everything else with this woman, it was twisted. Some strands of inky black hair escaped her tight top knot. Heavy bags, indicating many sleepless nights, hung under her eyelids, which were half-lidded, regarding Angela coolly. That wasn't my mother, said Angela resolutely. How strange, said the equally strange woman, eyeing Angela. To stand in front of you. The azure firelight flickered across her porcelain skin. Who are you? Asked Angela, a slight bit of fear edging its way into her voice. She cursed herself, attempting to quench it. The woman's smirk became wider, knowing she was feared. I am Princess Angela of the Fire Nation, and heir to the throne, she announced proudly. And you're the same. I'm not a princess, said Angela firmly. And you don't exist. You're not accepting your birthright, your divine right to rule? That is true power, and what you should be seeking. I'm seeking true mastery of fire bending, said Angela. That's power of the mightiest kind. Princess Angela laughed to herself. You are so unlike me after all. You're not thinking of the big picture. Yes, you'll be strong now, but what about when you grow old and decrepit? You would be royalty your whole life. Think of the conquests you could make in that time. I have no desire to be a tyrannical ruler, said the younger Angela, her eyes narrowed. Aang wouldn't like that. And the princess laughed louder, this time clenching her gut, losing all composure. Angela eyed her warily as she howled like a lunatic. Aang? The Avatar? You really have a desire for him? What's so funny about that? Angela demanded, clenching her fists, losing a bit of her own composure. Why couldn't she firebend right now? What are you, anyway? What do you know? Princess Angela pinched her bangs, propping her arm up on her elbow, her sharp nails sliding along her hair. Think of me as your inner demon. Literally, she said, punctuating her last word with ferociousness. She stepped closer to Angela, another smirk growing on her thick lips, each predatory step frightening her even more. What was she, that she could cause so much fear in Angela? She had never felt like this. If mastery of firebending is what you seek, then fine. But you won't become truly powerful traveling with that preachy airbender. The art of firebending holds many dark, and murderous, secrets. He wouldn't approve. Princess Angela stepped even closer to Angela with every word, circling around her, running a finger or two across her shoulder. Angela didn't move, each touch was sending more and more chills down her spine. From behind, the dark princess moved her head closer to Angela's ear, causing her to feel her breaths on her neck. She whispered, almost seductively. Leave the Avatar behind. You won't learn anything if you travel with your friends. They'll betray you one day. They'll hold you back. Trust me. Angela wrenched herself free from the demon's grip, glaring. You're wrong. Aang would never betray me. The princess laughed, but Angela ran. Sokka awoke to absolute darkness. Cursing, and fumbling around for his torch, he wasn't prepared when a shaft of light shone down on someone, some distance away. He squinted his good eye, trying to get a good look at the person. It was a woman, and she seemed strangely familiar. But her back was to him. Katara? He asked unsurely. He stood up and stepped closer, and with a start, he realized who it was. Mom. He started to walk toward her, but she sank into the darkness, lost forever. Again. Mom! He called, running after her. But there was no one there. There was a flash of light, and the next thing he knew, he was on a dock in a fishing village. He looked all around him, confused. Yeah, now, but without her they wouldn't be able to fend for themselves. If she really wanted to help, she would use her spirit magic to blow up that factory. Sokka spun to the source of the voice, recognizing it as a more light-hearted version of his own. His intact eye opened in shock, spotting a happier, more whole version of himself, standing next to people who looked unervingly like Aang and Katara. The strange image made gestures to indicate explosive spirit magic. Oh, pow. And then the Avatar spoke. Spirit magic doesn't work that way, Sokka. It's more like... And he did a stupidly elaborate dance on the spot, as if to one-up the buffoon Sokka. Whoa. The two were arm in arm a moment later, making fools of themselves with more noises and arm movements, causing the Katara lookalike to stalk off. Prince Sokka was perplexed. What was that about? His vision flashed again, and he was now greeted by the inside of some Earth Kingdom home. The Avatar was still there, as well as the two people who looked eerily like himself, still with two eyes, and his sister. A small girl was also there. And was she picking her nose? They didn't seem to notice him. The Avatar had what looked like a window curtain draped around his shoulders, his nose upturned in a mockery of the high class. He spoke in what he apparently thought was a very sophisticated manner. Good evening, Mr. Sokka Water Tribe, Aang said to Sokka's lookalike, confirming his identity. Ms. Katara Water Tribe. His sister. Lord Momo of the Momo dynasty, your Momo Ness. 2. The lemur? Wasn't its name Sabishi or something? Prince Sokka was thoroughly confused. The Sokka buffoon imitated the young boy. Avatar Aang, how you do go on. Aang bowed to Sokka, who bowed back, but deeper. Aang returned that bow with an even deeper one, instigating the buffoon to reply with one that nearly banged his head against his knees. And they both pulled their heads back to bow again, when... Crack! Their heads smacked together painfully and they both fell to the floor. Could some possible, alternate, idiotic version of himself exist somewhere like that? He hoped not. He hadn't acted that way since he was a child, and now he was embarrassed and somewhat ashamed. The dark tunnel appeared again, and he kept walking. Somewhere, he found his torch in his hand again. As he walked, the walls began to contort, opening up as if they were windows, showing him more scenes of the buffoon Sokka's alternate life. Yeah, and who keeps us laughing with sarcastic comments all the time. You're the idea guy. Don't worry, Sokka. Where we're going, you won't need any pants. You know, you're pretty wise for a kid. Sokka was running now, running down the length of the tunnel and away from all of these false memories. Hey, Aang. Do you miss everyone? Of course. I always do. I think about every single one of them. I failed to protect them all. You just sneezed, and flew 10 feet in the air. All right. Prince Sokka bellowed. I get it. Somehow, somewhere, we were friends. Now leave me alone. And then there was darkness. Aang emerged back into the sunlight, shielding his eyes for a moment to let the blindness pass. When he was able to see again, he saw that Azula, Zuko, and Sokka had already completed their trials. Aang wondered what theirs were like. Azula seemed haunted. For some reason, she was on high alert, nervous, and afraid. Something seemed to be at the back of her mind, something heavy and burdensome. What had she encountered? Worry for his friend gnawed at him. Then again, a fire-bending lesson would cheer her up. Zuko seemed almost curious and contemplative, not as angry at the world as he was before, willing to let his guard down around Aang again. The Avatar smiled. Apparently, he had gotten over his distrust of Aang. For some reason, he was clutching his chest. Sokka, like Azula, seemed almost disturbed, but perplexed. He was openly staring at Aang, a question in his blue eye. Aang broke the gaze and looked at the Sun Warriors, who were all assembled in front of them, waiting for the four to finish their trials. The chief was at their head. You have all successfully completed your trials, said the chief. Each of you has had a different experience, one that has hopefully done better for you. For many ages, these trials have judged the worth of anyone seeking true mastery of firebending. But we're not firebenders. Zuko yelled again, indicating him and Sokka. There's no reason we had to go through that. What were you going to do, hold us here and kill us if we didn't do it? The chief chuckled, surprising them. I know. We were never going to kill anyone. Both Zuko and Sokka fell to the ground, face first. But it's a valuable experience that most would die for. It wasn't that amazing, said Sokka gruffly. It varies for some people, said the chief with a shrug. It was just a straight line through the tunnel all along, wasn't it? Said Aang. The maze was all in our minds. He, for one, had an amazing experience. Can we get to the firebending now? Azula quipped. We've been dragging it on and on. Let's get to the point. Very well, said the chief. We'll show you right here and right now. Azula and Aang listened with rapt attention, the former with more enthusiasm, while Zuko and Sokka tried not to seem interested. Have either of the two of you witnessed the performance of blue firebending? Yes, said Aang, Azula, and Sokka at once. Aang looked at Azula and Sokka, surprised. They were looking at him the same way. When did this happen? Please elaborate, said the chief. I used it unintentionally in a fight against Sokka at the Dragon Altar in the Golden City, said Azula promptly. I asked my master about it, but he warned me about never using it again. Not that she listened. She tried several times after their conversation, but no trace of blue ever showed its way into her flames again, until she met Princess Azula. Avatar. I'd rather not talk about it, said Aang, thinking of, coincidentally, the same person Azula was. Very well. The chief turned to look at the two firebenders again. As you may know, blue fire is born out of killing intent, one of the harshest and most dangerous forms of firebending. Some think it leads to self-destruction, but often, it is necessary. In most cases, it is more powerful and hotter than typical red and orange firebending. So, you just want us to summon killing intent at will? Asked Aang. He wasn't sure if he could do that all the time. On the other hand, it explained a lot about the Azula from his world. Azula held out her palm, and almost immediately, a spark of blue flame erupted into life. She smirked. Excellent. In order to use that ability without leading to your own destruction, however, you need balance, the chief continued, holding out both of his hands. In his left, a blue fireball rested. With destruction, there is also life. And to Aang's great surprise, a ball of pure white fire formed in the chief's right palm, flickering serenely. White fire is born out of the desire to protect, and it is equally as strong as blue, if not stronger. Use both with caution, and sparingly. Too much of an unbalance can destroy your inner spirit. Azula held out her other hand, willing white fire to form. She wrinkled her brow as she stared into her empty palm. It's not working. You haven't found anything worth protecting yet, the chief informed. You will, in time. Let me try, said Aang. Concentrating, he held out both palms, face up. Thinking of all that he cherished, his friends, this world, and his own, and his desire to protect it all, he summoned white fire into his right hand. It was warm, pleasantly so, and the life in it thrived. Looking at his left hand, Aang dredged up memories of destruction wrought by Princess Azula and Fire Lord Ozai, of the wasteland Earth Kingdom, and of the deaths of his friends. For the first time in his life, Aang bent blue fire. It was just as malevolent as he remembered from Azula. I can feel the balance, he said. Neither force is greater than the other. I can't do it, Azula said through clenched teeth, anger seeping into her voice. I can't make white fire. The blue fire remained in her other hand. That's because you're pure evil, Hamgeo cut in annoyingly. You'll do it one day, said Aang reassuringly. You're strong. I know you can. Whatever. All I need is blue fire, anyway, she said, taking one of her fire-bending stances. The fire in her hand was shot forward in a pulse of blue, releasing heat that washed over everyone nearby, especially Hamgeo, who looked as if he got burned. Aang frowned. That's all you needed to learn, said the chief, ushering them away. You can go now. We'll be sure not to let the door hit us on the way out, thanks, said Sokka sarcastically. Aang clenched the blue and white fire in both of his hands, putting one on his hip and shaking his head disdainfully at Sokka. Come on, we'll go now, guys, he said to the others. And don't come back, said the chief, his face hard. Aang raised an eyebrow, and the chief's face lightened. Just kidding. You're welcome anytime. No, you're not, said Hamgeo sourly, nursing his burn. Mere minutes later, the four were on Appa's back, flying back down to Earth. That wasn't so bad, Zuko said to them all. No, it wasn't, said Aang. I actually enjoyed myself. He waited to see if he'd get the cold shoulder from Zuko again. When Zuko grinned back, Aang smiled. So what did you experience? He asked. I don't really know, said Zuko. The person I spoke to wasn't very clear. You're telling me, said Sokka. You spoke to someone? Aang asked, surprised. A spirit, Zuko amended. He could almost feel the annoyance of the scarred man as he said it. So did I, said Azula mysteriously. She didn't elaborate. Hey, you're not putting the rope back on my wrists, Sokka pointed out to them, giving Aang a sidelong glance. You've been good lately, said Aang, grinning. I'll give you another chance. Aang, feeling happier than he did in a long time, looked ahead with optimism. I'm coming, Toph. Your team is assembled, said the old woman, her grey eyes passing over the three younger women in front of her. Yes, and our mission realized, said Princess Katara. Hamma, set a course for the Southern Earth Kingdom. We're going avatar hunting. Behind her, boarding the royal watership, were Suki and Yu, both ready and willing to serve their princess and friend. I'm coming, brother. Good work, guys. You two did your job. Sokka didn't. Hey, I didn't directly appear to him. I wanted to be different. What do you mean? What did you do, Sokka? I showed him some of my memories. My happier ones. Yo, sweetness. Azula was up to something. I could feel her there. Azula? What's she doing? She appeared to her own counterpart. Probably told her things. What things? How am I supposed to know? She was there, that's all that matters. How? Isn't everyone else from our world, you know, stuck? But not us. Why? Why were we spared from that? It was probably Twinkletoes. I bet he had something to do with it. It's impossible to know. We can't exactly talk to him. Ugh. I'm so mad. I feel like we're useless, stuck in this little corner of the spirit world. We need to do more. We can't. Not until the worlds start merging more. For now, we have to appear to our counterparts and make them help Aang. We're sort of like spirits now, and with that, we can do more. Observe more. We're not spirits. Toph smirked, punching her palm. I gotta start appearing to the other me in a bit. She'll get to kick butt. Just a little while longer and I'll be able to help. No more sitting in boredom for me. Check the description for the links to the author.